Coming up on Esoteric Atlanta.
I remember learning about it in an abnormal psychology course in college because I also have an undergraduate in psychology. But Phineas Gage, look up Phineas Gage. He he had a steel rod, I believe, that ran through his prefrontal cortex, and he was perfectly normal prior. And once it ran through his prefrontal cortex, it changed his brain structurally, and he started exhibiting um, behavior of psychopathy. And he's really the ground zero for psychopathy research to show that it can be induced by a traumatic brain injury.
And before we get into the episode today, just a big thank you to all of our patrons and our producers here on Esoteric Atlanta. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible. If you would like to help support the work we do here on Esoteric Atlanta, there is a link to our Patreon account down in the description box below. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Esoteric Atlanta. Of course, my name is Bryce. We have a treat. We get Criminal Justice Chris twice this week. If you guys missed it, we did an occult show a few days ago with our mutual friend RockerMike. It was a long show where we went through a lot of the occult symbolism in the Son of Sam case specifically, and that was just loaded with information. I'm going to actually go through and pick through some of that information and look deeper at it myself because Chris is a wealth of research. But today we're going to be talking about something that is, we were just saying offline, I personally feel like is an epidemic right now. And I know people throw around the word narcissist a lot, but there is an actual, and I think most people know this at this point, but if you don't, there is an actual, like a narcissist isn't somebody that just has a big ego, right, Chris?
No, but there's a common myth that people think that they have high self-esteem or low self-esteem. And according to research, it doesn't really prove out either way.
Yeah. It is narcissistic personality disorder is, and there's many different brands, we'll say, of different types of narcissistic personality disorder. And a lot of people I know of my viewers, including myself, have been the victim of narcissists. And that is one of the hardest traumas to deal with in a lot of ways because it's very mental. It's it's one thing to suffer physical harm. I mean, that's bad. That's bad too. But at least like you see it, you know what it is. But with the mind scrambling that happens when you're dealing with a narcissist can sometimes be detrimental to the victim for years to come. It takes a long time to work through and unscramble everything that got scrambled. And so where do you want to start, Chris? Do we want to start with the definition of narcissistic personality disorder, or I'm going to let you start where you want to start with this because you've done a lot of research into this. You've been studying this.
Yeah. So, how about we cover like the diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder first?
Sure.
So it covers grandiosity, a preoccupation with unbridled achievements, a need for power, a love for his or her own brilliance, surrounding himself or herself with beauty, including his or her own or ideal love, feeling of uniqueness, and that he or she can only be understood by people who they deem to be of equal stature, disproportionate approval and respect, entitlement, exploitation of others, a lack of empathy, malicious envy towards others or believing others demonstrate malicious envy towards him or her, and overconfidence in behaviors. And in order to meet the criteria, you only need to hit a checkbox of 5. Oh, so I
And there are
what do you
different
want?
types, right? Do we want to talk about the different types? Or, I mean, I'm going to let you kind of go where you want to go, but there's like covert, there's malignant, there's different types of narcissism too.
There are different types. I mean, like in my blog, for instance, in the area of research that I focus on, it's more of a Likert scale
Mhm.
where, you might have a 0 to 3, which is low narcissism, and then maybe 4 to 7, which is kind of the normal range, and then 8 to 10, which is malignant narcissism. Narcissism isn't inherently bad. We all are a little bit have a little bit of narcissism. It helps us survive as a species, quite frankly. But whenever it becomes toxic, it becomes a problem,
Right,
and therapy needs to be sought for it.
right, right. Now what's the name of that blog, Chris? I'm going to pull it up for our audience. What's the title of that?
Um, the title of the blog is Manny Grossman with the Grossman Files, the interplay of narcissism, malignant envy, and shame on social media.
All right, I am
Unfortunately, I have to, because his name is in the title, I'm gonna have to bring his name into this, but
that's okay.
yeah.
We know that they like that good or bad, they like attention. So,
It
um,
would it would definitely seem that way. And I mean, you've had your own problems with him, and I've had my own problems, and others within the community. Um, Son of Sam research community have had problems with them. And it's just gotten to the point where it's so toxic
yeah.
that the behavior needs to be addressed.
And we see this a
Especially,
lot.
especially with the recent post that he made in his community section of YouTube.
Is this the post right here? This is the one, right, about his quote unquote apology.
Yeah, and it's not even really an apology. And his behavior is too cumulative. And I mean, you can tell by reading the post, Bryce, that he doesn't take accountability for his behavior, and that's a problem. Uh, Recently, he made the accusation that Carl De Niro shook um, somebody down for $50 for their autograph. It was Shayna Glassman, which and he obtained it from an uncredible, a not very credible source. Uh, he didn't get it verified elsewhere. He's accused Maury Terry of the same behavior, using third party sources and then putting it in his book. He's actively criticized him for years for the behavior, yet he engages in that himself. And then whenever he's called out for it, he can't really make a true apology, and he continues to make excuses for himself. As you can see in the blog, like, the elements of a true apology include, acknowledgement of wrongdoing, responsibility, genuine remorse, explanation of the harm, commitment to change, corrective action, a sincere tone, timeliness, and empathy. And he lacks that. And I'm not at liberty to discuss his behavior towards Shayna Glassman. I've been having personal conversations with her for about the last week,
Mhm.
and they've amplified in the last 24 hours. But his treatment of Shayna Glassman has also been deplorable, and she's tired of it as well.
Yeah. And one thing I noticed in this that stuck out to me like a sore thumb, just from my dealings with narcissists will only quote unquote apologize if they feel like there's benefit for them, if it's going to put them in a better light. So they use the apology to their advantage, but they never really apologize. They kind of talk around it. And one thing I've noticed, he put the Son of Sam battles of the last 4 years are very ugly. I'm not an innocent player in that. What he's doing though in this whole, again, I notice a lot of narcissists do that. When they go to apologize for what they've done, they pull other people down in it too. well, we've both done this. We've both, instead of saying, listen, I'm really sorry, I should not have done that, they say, well, we've both done this. We've both done things. It's not just you taking accountability, it's pulling the other person down with you. And that to me is just, I hate when people do that, like apologize for what you did. But that stood out to me like a sore thumb when I saw that. In my encounters with, I kind of knew there was something wrong with Manny. I know I've said this before. I laugh about this because my channel, as you know, Chris, I cover an array of topics on this channel. You know, everything from like Rasputin's missing wiener to the Borgias to Son of Sam to we're going through the Cassiopean experiment right now. It's different. And I love bringing people on who are really committed to a topic that have done extensive research because it helps give a wider understanding of the complexity of these cases. But the fact that my first Son of Sam video, he was like one of the first in the comment section. And that was
Yeah.
weird to me because I was like, but I'm not a Son of Sam channel. Like you're literally sitting there lurking, and this is the silliest channel to be commenting on because my audience knows we cover many topics on this channel. You know, and I noticed that right away. But yeah, this to me, I think was it you or Mike that called it a PR stunt? That's what this feels like, a PR stunt.
I agree with you, and I that's in my blog, and you know I believe it's in my blog. I can't remember, to be honest. I would have to go back through the blog because frankly he's accused me of having artificial intelligence write my blogs, and which is ridiculous. I sometimes refer to Chat GPT to do an outline for a blog.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure, because it helps you to organize it, but you cannot rely on Chat GPT to write anything because half the time it's going to pull things that are factually inaccurate.
Yep.
You have to go through and check it, and in order to cover your bases, that you're not going to put information out there that's false. I'll flat out say in one of my classes that I took about a year and a half ago for human, our instructor asked us to write a paper on human use Chat GPT and then check everything and then write a paper on where it was wrong. That's what we did. And let me tell you what, Chat GPT, it has its pluses, it has its negatives, but you cannot rely on it to write something for you
Yeah.
unless you go back in and you heavily edit it and change it.
I rely on Chat GPT to do like Instagram post, like 3 sentences about a topic. And I'll put it into Chat GPT and I'll just see what it says. And if it's wrong, there have been times when, like, if I have a, you know, especially for like the yoga world, if I need a quick, because I can be long-winded in my explanation. So if I
Yeah,
like need a quick little
yes.
simple way of explaining something, I'll put it and I'll double check it because sometimes Chat GPT is wrong.
Like I will tell you, I mean, you can look at this blog and compare it to my other blogs. You can tell it's not my writing style for the
Yeah.
most part. Um, I put in I copied and pasted some things online. I put in instances of things that he's personally done for me and just went boom and hit the button and it spit something out and I went through and proofread it and made a couple changes
Mhm.
and then hit publish.
And that's what it's
And
good for. It's good for little, little bullet point things, like and then you double check it too again, and that makes sense. But yeah, if you're relying on ChatGPT to write your papers or write your articles, you're screwing yourself over because this is a computer system. It's not a sentient being. And so it's just collecting data, and sometimes that data might not be accurate. So I absolutely, and listen, Chris, you and I both come from a generation where we had the Dewey Decimal System. So we are
mhm,
used to having to work hard for our information and write a paper. So
yes.
um, I feel more comfortable writing papers because that's how I grew up. I did not grow up with the internet. Dewey Decimal System, write the paper. So yeah, I think anybody in our generation would probably never even go to Chat GPT to write an article at this point because that's not what we're used to anyway.
And I also want to be clear, he's probably going to watch this podcast and say, "Oh, it was made as a rebuttal to his recent community post." No, that's not accurate. And if he wants to push that, I'm going to show our text message history with your approval, our email history showing that this podcast was scheduled
Oh,
well
absolutely.
before his post.
Absolutely, it was. We were talking about this because I think you and I have a lot of the same interest, Chris. I'm
Hmm.
very fascinated with human psychology and why people do what they do, and that seems like something, that's why you're such a good researcher because we're trying to understand like the patterns that people show, like the occultism. We talked a lot about the psychology behind occultism,
Hmm.
and why the human brain is so complex. And there's always this huge debate with things like nature or nurture. And part of me thinks a lot of things are a combination of both. And, you can have a home with one of the most fascinating things to me is that you can have a home with a narcissistic parent with multiple children, and all of the children, even though they're growing up in the same home, it will be like a completely different childhood because one kid is going to be the golden child, one kid is going to be the scapegoat, and it's a toss up of whether a kid is going to mimic the narcissism or whether they're going to end up being the polar opposite and become the empath.
There
And it's
does seem to be a genetic component to
Mhm.
narcissistic personality disorder. All the same, there are also environmental components like constantly having to curate your image on social media, that are going to create narcissistic personality disorder, including parents that don't properly mirror their child's emotional states.
Yeah.
It can increase the chances for it. So that, there are tons of environmental factors that are going to trigger it and make it worse.
Have you
And
ever?
I frankly, I don't really want to excessively shame him
Yeah.
publicly because, as I said in my blog, um, there are things that he is very, very good at, obviously. His skills in gardening and landscaping a lot of people have said clearly they're exceptional, including people that he used to podcast with. And I feel like he would have thrived academically if he had obtained an undergraduate degree in botany. But um, and this is, whenever people have a come to Jesus meeting with somebody, whenever they have a substance abuse problem and they don't know what's coming, and they just grab them and they have all these people waiting for them in a
Like an
house,
intervention?
and
Yeah.
it's an intervention. This is what this is. This is an intervention. I have I have tried to engage with him offline through email and tell him, don't post impulsively.
Yeah.
You need to think what you're putting out there before you do it. And he keeps engaging in the behavior, and then he tries to make himself look like a victim. And I'll be frank, I mean, he has a huge history of having interpersonal communication problems with others, um, volatility. He need there's an emotional regulation problem going on there, as well as integrity. And if he wants his new business venture with permaculture Puerto Rico to take off, um, he's going to have to make some steps to make sure that he rectifies it. So this type of, you know, this doesn't happen anymore. He's fractured the Son of Sam research community. He's harassed friends and supporters of David Berkowitz through podcasts, emails, social media. And he's told a prior podcast partner who he's no longer in contact with that he can't even go to a bar without getting into a fight with a person. Um, what does that say? I know tons of people that go to bars all the time and they can get along just fine with people.
Right. No,
Um,
that brings so true the impulsive issues, Chris. When I first stumbled upon this particular person, I literally thought he was in his early 20s
yeah,
because of his behavior online. And it was Mike, our friend Mike, that was like, no, Bryce, he's like in his 50s. And I was like, are you kidding? Because to me, this seems like behavior of like someone who's in their early 20s who hasn't had their full brain developed yet. We know sometimes young kids in that age, young adults can be impulsive, and then you learn your lesson. You learn not to be. And my boyfriend brought up a good point a long time ago when we first started dating. He was like, people who have like temper tantrums online all the time, like we're all guilty of posting dirty laundry at some point, but we learn from that.
mhm,
We learn not to do that anymore. But people who do that all the time, my boyfriend's like, it's a sign that they don't really have anybody in their own lives to be able to express frustrations with and talk things out with. And I think what we see with a lot of people with narcissism is not just this, but just in general, is that they'll have people around them, but they don't see human beings as like actual human beings. They're more like tools. And so they have their flying monkeys, but they don't have like genuine connections with people, like a genuine friendship or a relationship where they can be vulnerable and express, if something happens online that upsets me, I can go to my boyfriend, I can vent and talk about it to the point where at the end of the conversation, we're usually laughing and I've rolled the steam off so I can just ignore it. Whereas I don't think narcissists really have the ability to have that deep of a connection with another human, if that makes sense.
Well, narcissists have a tendency to use people as a means to their own end.
Yeah.
And that is clearly documented with what he did with the non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah. Yeah.
With the documents that he received from Joshua Zeman that Carl De Niro, of all people, advocated to help him get. I would say, and I think Carl would say, and others who know Carl and the background of the story would say, Carl was used
Yeah.
in order to get his way. And then Manny Grossman signs a non-disclosure agreement. He obtains the documents. He violates it almost immediately.
Yeah.
Handed it out to compromised law enforcement officers in the state of New York, gives it to his podcast partners, gave it to one podcast partner who then decided to just hand it out like candy to other people. I mean, those are investigative journalist notes with people's information in them that could put people at harm.
Hey, you guys, editing Bryce, just to give a little bit of a backstory here with the situation that we're speaking about with the non-disclosure agreement and breaking of the non-disclosure agreement, because this is a really vital piece of information and story that you see in a lot of cases with other narcissists. They all tend to feel like that the rules don't apply to them. Carl Denar, for those who don't know what Chris is referring to, this is referring to the Son of Sam case, which we have covered a lot on this story. Carl is one of the survivors, and Carl became close to Maury Terry, who wrote the book The Ultimate Evil, because Maury Terry speculated that David Berkowitz was not the only person involved in Son of Sam, that there was a cult working with David Berkowitz, which most people happen to agree there's overwhelming evidence. There's overwhelming evidence that there was a big cover up with the NYPD, that David Berkowitz took the fall, all that kind of stuff. Well, back in like the early 2020s, Netflix was creating a docuseries, I believe it's still on Netflix, called The Sons of Sam, that goes through Maury Terry's work. Carl is interviewed in this series. And with that being said, they had in their possession a bunch of Maury Terry's notes for like over 10 years worth of investigation. And they divvied some of these notes out. Some people got to see them, and they all signed non-disclosure agreements. So they would not release any of the information in Maury Terry's notes due to privacy, all that kind of stuff. And the particular person that we're speaking about signed the non-disclosure agreement. Carl vouched for him, and basically he threw everybody under the bus and released all this information to the NYPD, to other people, that he signed an agreement that he wouldn't do. And this is really, really typical for narcissists to feel that they are entitled and that the rules do not apply to them. If you have not seen the documentary on Netflix, it's called The Sons, plural, Sons of Sam. It's a really great documentary, and that will kind of get you up to speed as to what's going on in the Son of Sam case. And this particular podcaster that Chris is referring to has caused a lot of problems. He's kind of been like a wrecking ball, very much uses tactics that narcissists use to try to destroy other people, because he personally believes that Berkowitz was the only person. I mean, it's silly. It's all very silly, but it's gone too far in a lot of cases where their doxing has been involved, all that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to give that background so you guys understand the severity of the story that Chris is referring to.
As of, June of 2023. I mean, what would be his motivation to continue to talk about the case with others whenever his personal conversations with an investigative journalist have been violated like that? I mean, seriously.
I think with Berkowitz, whenever he flips a story, my personal opinion, just reading the situation, I see there's a lot of fear, like he's trying to protect someone or and that is with the NDA, the non-disclosure agreement. First of all, I've met Carl one time. He came on my show. Super
Hmm.
nice guy. Was immediately comfortable with him. For those who don't know, he was one of the surviving victims of the Son of Sam. Funny guy. If you watch him in the docu-series, The Sons of Sam's, he makes a joke about, like about it and, wanted to get up from the hospital and go home. They're like, you can't, you can't go home, and just a super nice guy. To have this happen, yeah, happened to him at such a young age and I told him this, like, can't remember how I said it, but I cannot imagine like being in my early 20s, have something like this happen to me, just happen, just a kid, just doing my thing, trying to figure out life. And then this happens. I survive it and I become wrapped up in this huge story that now has followed me for the rest of my life. He has handled, Carl, in my opinion, has handled his situation, from what I know of him, with a lot of grace. And the fact that he's been able to meet with David, and obviously that's a big, Carl's a very, that takes a big move to be able to do that and to be able to come to peace, to help Maury Terry, to accept the situation for what it is, a situation you did not want to get involved in, that you just were, fate just pulled you in. And then for Manny, so just so for my audience who doesn't, just so they understand, because this is one thing that speaks to narcissism too. First of all, they are very entitled and they don't think the rules apply to them. Narcissists never think the rules apply to them. Whereas if you and I signed a non-disclosure agreement with someone like Carl, who is a very kind person, I would take that seriously. Wouldn't you, Chris?
Yes, I would take it seriously. And I also want to discuss the person that distributed these documents that used to podcast with Manny, because you also had a problem with this person in your comment section probably a month and a half, 2 months ago, Eric Galati.
Right.
You
Yeah.
remember having the problem with Eric Galati.
Yeah.
Anyhow, Eric Galati said publicly for a couple years and in a post that he was not given these documents by Manny Grossman. I have a copy of the comments in a Son of Sam group. He said he made up a story and stated that he was given documents by Santa Claus and Daddy Cool, and then rambled on. You'll have to refer to my. Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said his full
Oh,
name.
I
Can
think
you
people
edit
know.
that
Yeah,
out?
I think Rocker Mike.
Okay.
I think he's open with his name. Yeah, but they call
Okay.
him Rocker Mike. Yeah, our friend Mike.
Okay. So Eric Galati um, makes the post, says Santa Claus and Daddy Cool dropped these documents on him. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little annoyed right now. He covered for Manny Grossman for almost 2 years. Um, he told me personally, and he told others, that he obtained the documents from somebody who did not sign a non-disclosure agreement.
Well, that doesn't
Manny
make sense.
Grossman signed the non-disclosure agreement. And then he proceeded to tell me, even though he hasn't had a conversation with this person before, and you've had this person on your podcast, John Mitchell,
Mm-hmm.
he told me John Mitchell never signed a non-disclosure agreement, which I'm going to be frank, it can give the air that he could have gotten them from John Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought for quite a while, well, I wonder if John Mitchell violated the NDA and gave him documentation. Eventually, I made contact with John Mitchell after I had questioned Carl De Niro about it. And Carl was like, no, Christina, he signed a non disclosure agreement and I'm going to send you proof of it. And he sent it to me by email. And I was like, whoa, Okay, well, I need to talk to John more about what's going on. I contact John. He also verifies that he signed a non-disclosure agreement. Uh, but I mean, the main problem is why cover for Manny Grossman and say, I got these documents from somebody that signed a somebody who didn't sign a non-disclosure agreement, put out there that John Mitchell, that it's a myth that he signed one. Um, because it gives the impression that John could have distributed the documents. And John has been actively attacked for years on Manny Grossman's podcast. And it's beyond ridiculous.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm not, maybe there was a true misunderstanding with Eric Galati not understanding that John Mitchell did in fact sign a non-disclosure agreement. Regardless, the way these the way these Maury documents have been handled is just it's past ridiculous.
Well, I want to say too,
After Carl De Niro vouched for Manny
yeah,
Grossman,
he got stabbed in the
and
back.
to have him betray his trust like that.
And I want to say, when John's been on my channel, I really liked, like, John is, I really liked, he is a wealth of knowledge. He's interesting, and I got nothing but good, honest, integral vibes from him. But so for the people, from what I understand of the situation, this is when they were doing the documentary, right? The Netflix documentary, and they went up and got some of Maury Terry's.
I believe that the documents were obtained maybe around I would have to go back and look at my notes. I think 2021.
Yeah, so guys, for those who don't know, Maury Terry passed away in 2015, and he's the one that wrote The Ultimate Evil, and Carl was working, Carl started working with him. There were a lot of people that obviously realized there was more to the Son of Sam case. We had the build up to the Son of Sam docu series being released. There was and this was like over a decade's worth of on the grounds research, that files and piles of research from Maury Terry. And from what I understand, they went up, they all signed non-disclosure. So that means we're going to trust you to look at this stuff, but not release it. Right after they did, Manny released it. Now, this Eric guy, that reminds me so much, Chris, of a flying monkey. Hey, you guys, once again, this is Editing Bryce, and I want to insert the clinical definition of a flying monkey because I believe, in the context of looking at narcissism, the flying monkey is almost as important, if not as important, as looking at the narcissist. And good people can get caught up in being a flying monkey for a narcissist. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands what we're referring to, or what I'm referring to, when I ask about this Eric guy potentially being a flying monkey for the narcissist. So the definition goes as follows: a flying monkey is a term used to describe individuals who act on behalf of a narcissist to manipulate, control, or attack others. These people are often used by the narcissist to carry out their wishes, spread misinformation, or create a distraction, all while making the narcissist appear innocent or less culpable. In the context of narcissistic relationships, flying monkeys may confront or harass someone the narcissist targets, spread rumors, false information, or gossip, defend or justify the narcissist behavior, serve as a messenger for the narcissist commands. The term originated from the Wizard of Oz, where flying monkeys served the Wicked Witch. In emotional or psychological ABUSC scenarios, flying monkeys are manipulated or coerced into supporting the narcissist agenda, often contributing to the victim's distress. It is important to recognize these dynamics, especially if you're dealing with manipulative or ABUSIVE behaviors, and seek support or advice from mental health professionals if needed. So super important to realize your own mistakes if you have acted as a flying monkey before, and to also notice, if you're dealing with a narcissist, that they will always have flying monkeys around them. Flying monkeys also tend to enable the narcissist behavior. So even though you might like the flying monkey that's tied to a narcissist, and that flying monkey might be a good person that's just being manipulated by the narcissist. It's important to also kind of separate yourself from them as well until they eventually figure it out, because as we know with narcissists, they will eventually turn on their flying monkeys too. All right, you guys, back to the show. Do you think Eric is it can go one or two ways? I know narcissists have the propensity to work well with each other. Narcissists can work well together. But they also, narcissists can persuade an empathetic person to work on their behalf as like a flying monkey. And that comes obviously from the Wizard of Oz, where they'll have somebody else do their dirty work. Narcissists are famous for throwing other people under the bus. They are a lot of times pathological liars. They also project. We see a lot of projection with Manny too, I think. What he accuses other people of doing, he's actually doing. So with Eric, do you think was a flying monkey of Manny's? Like, how do you think that happened, Chris?
I really don't know. I really don't want to comment on Eric Galati further.
Okay.
I'm beyond disappointed that he covered for Manny Grossman for 2 years and tried telling me personally, as well as others, that he obtained the documents from somebody who did not sign a non-disclosure agreement, only to have Manny Grossman make a post in a blog contradicting that about a week and a half ago. I wish Eric Galati the best.
I hope he learned his lesson.
I think,
Hard lesson to learn.
he's tried to help people with research.
Yeah.
I can't speak for his intentions. I really can't.
We had a situation in the yoga world. I had my friend Mariella come on in the Ashtanga world a few months back. The Parm Guru, my teacher, unexpectedly passed away. And the way that it works, it's fast passed down in a family, the lineage. And it got because he was in his early 50s, because he unexpectedly had a heart attack. This is a very Indian heritage. And most of us, like, white people, understand that this is not our heritage. We're never going to be the Parm Gurus. We're totally cool with that. But because my teacher's children are so young, it was kind of this panic that happened, because who's going to now take over the Shala? Well, right in India, when this happened, this group of super colleagues of mine, teachers, famous teachers, like swooped into India and then tried to take over. And a few of us started to speak out about this. Like, this isn't right. This isn't fair. They started, like, almost, in India, it's called bakshish. It's like they upcharged people, were basically like having people pay for certain, qualification. It got very dirty very fast. And for those of us that spoke out about this, now a couple of these people I have suspected for a while now have narcissistic person. I know these people, and they're not my favorite people. I don't like being around them in India. I always laugh and tell my students here that flexibility means nothing, because there are a lot of flexible assholes out there, and I know most of them. I know them in India. It's the same game for them. And so I spoke out, and so did Mariella Cruz. She also wrote a blog, spoke out about this. This is not right. This is not how this works. This is not yoga. This is not what we do. And I had spoken out I've done a couple episodes speaking out, like, okay, so you can do the practice and you can parrot the philosophy, but have you actually done the inner work? Because you're behaving like a total tyrant right now. Well, because now these are people who also virtue signal, so they go on social media and they're very woke, and they always say believe all women and let women speak. Well, as soon as two women started to speak up, my boyfriend, who's also an authorized teacher and senior to me, got contacted by these people to try to shut me up, but yet they want women to speak. And so these behaviors play out in all different societies, right? It's a different subject, but it's the same playbook. And isn't that common with narcissists, Chris? They kind of follow the same playbook, don't they?
They do, but arguably, I want to stand up a little bit more for countries that are overseas. Um, there's more evidence to be found that it's in societies like our own than
Yep.
in communal societies such as India and China.
Oh,
And
India's not the problem in my situation.
I'm
It was
not
the white
saying
people.
I'm not saying I prefer those societies, to be clear, because I don't like their form of governments.
Right.
But at the same time, I think at some point we need to acknowledge that we live in a capitalistic society. It's very competitive,
Mhm.
and social media contributes to that, um, because we have to constantly promote ourselves to make money.
Yeah.
So your social media is adding to the problem of narcissism.
I totally agree. And with the whole situation, it wasn't India that was the problem. It was Americans that came in and manipulated the system. And yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that when I'm in India, I have a nonprofit where we go into the slums and try to help. When I'm there, we raise money before we go. $10, 10 US dollars will really literally support one child in the slums in India for a year. We don't take any money for ourselves. It's when we're over there, we raise money to help the kids in the slum. And for me, when I first ended up in the slums one night in India accidentally, I was so humbled by how, I realized like what a creep I am sometimes, like where I get mad because my iPhone isn't the newest iPhone or this or that. And I'm sitting here looking at people who literally don't have a pot to piss in. Like that's where that saying comes from. They literally don't, they go to the bathroom on the ground. That's how poor they are.
Mhm.
They have houses made out of trash. And I was so humbled in that moment that I decided to open up a nonprofit and do everything I could to try to help because as impoverished as I think I am, I'm so wealthy compared to the rest. We all are as Americans or Westerners. We have so much compared to some developing countries. And I think that as when we're in countries like America in the Western world, Canada, Europe, Australia, it's almost like it's that epidemic of too much. And so we become entitled because we can be, right? We can be. And like when you're in a developing country and you're poor, you don't have space in your day to be entitled. You're fighting for survival in a very hard way. And so there's no comfort, right? There's no comfort. So you can't be a creature. There's no TV to turn on to distract you or, a pantry full of food to choose from. Listen, those people in the slums don't have to go on diets because they most of them need more food. Like I get, I think and we talked about this before the show started. Like I've always been bothered by the whole participation trophy that when children were just getting, I mean, for like 3 and 4 year olds, sure, give them a participation trophy. Those are, listen, I'm not a sports person, but I will go watch 3 year olds play soccer any day of the week. That is comedy gold to watch 3 year olds play. They don't even keep score when kids are that little, right? Because they're just running around the field, spinning circles and picking flowers. Um, but when I was
I
growing
will,
up,
I will tell you comedy gold, and that is Mike's Substack,
yes,
because he wrote a very funny blog about um, Manny Grossman ordering a podcast trophy, and it's being delivered through a drone and crashing through his window and being dropped on his head and accidentally killing him. And I mean, it's obviously satire,
right.
but all the same. I mean, people have had it with him, and they're getting to the point like Mike, where he feels like he has to write satire in order to get the point across.
Yeah, it's and I'm gonna pull it up, guys. This is Mike's Substack. I'll have all this, and Chris is on Substack too, so I'm gonna have everything down in the description box below, so you can follow. But it's interesting to look at cases like this, like I said, Chris, because so many people, I know a lot of my audience members have been the victim of a narcissist. And so it does in some, like, I guess misery loves company. It is kind of nice to hear other stories in other communities because you realize like this is a literal personality disorder you're dealing with. It's not you, it's them. Um,
Yes.
and that kind of, I think that helps with the healing. I think that helps people start to heal because they're really good at gaslighting, narcissists are.
Oh, indeed they are.
And our sponsor for this episode today is the Esoteric Academy. The Esoteric Academy is a virtual online mystery school that I have opened with my friend Paula. I have taken all of the years of information that I have learned in India through traditional yoga, and I have transferred that knowledge into more modern exercises. As many of you know, especially if you have been with me since the beginning, exercise is indeed the foundation of spirituality, because exercise brings you into your body. It brings vitality and life force in through your DNA and helps to activate your chakras. I mean, you can sit around and talk about your chakras all day long. Nothing, and I mean nothing, is going to happen to your chakras unless you actually move your physical body to activate the energetic body. In spirituality, we are taught that the body is the Shakti, or the creation of the soul. It's the vessel in which karma is held. And we come here to planet Earth to learn the lessons through karma, because that's all karma is. It's just lessons. Now, I had to travel all the way to India to get this information, but you get to learn this in the comfort of your own home. You get to exercise and sweat and be vulnerable in the comfort of your own home. We know that sometimes going to the gym or going to a yoga shala can be intimidating, but again, you don't have to worry about that with the Esoteric Academy. We have all levels of classes from beginning to intermediate to advanced. We also have courses on this mystery school that go over the Bhagavad Gita, the alchemy of movement, holistic healing, quantum healing, meditation, and much, much more. We also have a community tab for all of the members of the Academy to be able to communicate and bond, as well as offering live classes and live calls with you each month. The Esoteric Academy proudly serves students globally, and we would love to have you join us. We have two different payment options. One is for $25 a month that grants you all of the exercise classes, and the other is $40 a month, which grants you all of the exercise classes as well as all of the courses. But right now we are running a special. If you use the discount code RockerMike69, you will get 20% off your first 6 months at the Esoteric Academy. Again, that's the discount code RockerMike69. On top of that, you also get 7 days of a free trial to try out the Academy and to see if you like it. If you're not happy with the Academy after your first 7 days, you can always cancel, no problem. All the information will be down in the description box below. Remember to use the discount code RockerMike69 at checkout so you can have 20% off your first 6 months with us on the Academy. Now, back to the show. Now, that is what really, and I think that's really what screws people's mind up. It's one thing to be love bombed and then be told you can't do anything right, but when the gaslighting starts, that will make a normal-minded person, a healthy-minded person, feel crazy and start thinking they're actually the problem. Christopher, I know gaslighting gets thrown around a lot, but what is gaslighting? What is the real epidemic of gaslighting? What does that look like? It's not just lying to people, is it? It's different than just lying to people.
I would call it a deliberate attempt with lying, and then doubling down and making the person feel like they're I don't have the definition in front of me, but I would best define it as lying to a person deliberately, and then making the person feel like they're the one that they're going crazy.
That's a perfect, I quickly Googled it. Dr. Google says, gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation where someone distorts the truth to make another person doubt their own perception of reality,
Yes.
memories, or feelings. It's a
Yes.
tactic used to control someone and can have severe emotional consequences, leading to confusion, low self-esteem, and even depression. Key aspects of gaslighting. Gaslighting is a form of abuse where the perpetrator uses deception and manipulation to undermine the victim's sense of reality. doubt, and confusion. The goal is to make the victim question their own sanity, memories, and perception of events. Control and dependence. By making someone doubt themselves, the perpetrator gains control and can manipulate their behavior. Common tactics. Gaslighting can involve lying, denying events, twisting words,
Mhm.
minimizing
Minimizing.
minimizing feelings, or accusing the victim of being crazy. Long-term impact. Gaslighting can have a lasting impact on mental health, leading to anxiety, depression, and difficulty trusting others. Some examples of: you're imagining things or you're making that up, blaming, it's your fault or you're too sensitive, questioning memories, I never said that or you're wrong about that, minimizing feelings, it's not that big of a deal or you're overreacting, insults, you're crazy, you're always getting things wrong.
Yes.
It's
I
serious.
think that couldn't be better said. And I have a very low pain threshold for narcissism and gaslighting, specifically because I grew up in a household with a parent who was a malignant narcissist and a gaslighter. And I will flat out say it. I am no longer in contact with my father. He doesn't have the diagnosis, but I guarantee you if he was put under a hair psychopathy test checklist and an MRI, I guarantee you he would check positive for psychopathy.
Yeah.
100%.
Do you know who Dr. Ramani is, Chris?
No, I do not.
She has a pretty big YouTube channel. She's a specialist in narcissism. And she talked about, like, there's a difference between lying and gas. Like, every person will lie every now and again, but someone who's not a gaslighter, if they're caught in a lie, they're not going to double down and they're not going to try to manipulate to make you question. They're going to be like, "Yeah, you got me. I lied." Like they're not, but doubling down, that's really a big sign of gaslighting. We're seeing that hardcore with Gypsy Rose Blanchard on social media. You guys, I've talked about where she'll say in like her audiobook that her mother never let her play with Barbies. And then she'll do a video about how she loved having Barbies as a child and people will call her out and she'll double down
Yes,
and pretend like you're the
yes.
crazy person. And
Well, that is one indicator of psychopathy is problems with executive functioning, which is in the front of the brain. It's in the prefrontal cortex where a person cannot keep their statements straight. They'll say
interesting.
you might even look in the same paragraph where they'll make one statement and then they end up contradicting themselves in the same
Immediately.
paragraph, or it could be in a couple paragraphs away, or it could be a person is podcasting something out and they're saying one thing and then the next minute they're contradicting themselves. It's a red flag for psychopathy.
So
It's
with this
probably
being a part
it's
with the,
also borderline personality disorder. They tend to be very close to one another,
yeah.
where borderline personality disorder isn't as severe.
Yeah, so
um
let's talk about now with the first with the frontal lobe issue. Is that a developmental issue? I know Gypsy Rose Blanchard has a microdeletion. She has a chromosome disorder, and one of the side effects of this, you can actually tell by looking at her, she has a chromosome disorder. And it's not, I want to make that very clear. Like Down syndrome is also a chromosome disorder, but Down syndrome is not the same thing as what she has. What she has is it actually, one of the side effects, let me actually just pull it up, is well, some of them can be things like schizophrenia and a psychopathy. They can have behavioral problems with this particular micro deletion. I'm going to actually pull it up for you. Um,
Psychopathy tends to be genetic. um, but it can also be caused by environmental factors, mostly related to head injuries. Like, for instance, there was some, but I used to do volunteer work for child visitation, and there was a person that I worked with that had custody of his daughter. It was the saddest situation I've seen in my life. One parent had borderline personality disorder. He had an injury, and we were convinced that he had psychopathy. Um, and his behavior was just off the charts, and the mother's behavior was off the charts, and the kid was suffering as a result
yeah.
because of all the conflict.
What?
There's also an instance of another person. I'm trying to remember this guy's name. Maybe you can look it up. Um, he was some type of construction worker, and this was years ago, and he might have worked for a railway. I remember learning about it in an abnormal psychology course in college because I also have an undergraduate in psychology. But Phineas Gage, look up Phineas Gage. He he had a steel rod, I believe, that ran through his prefrontal cortex, and he was perfectly normal prior. And once it ran through his prefrontal cortex, it changed his brain structurally, and he started exhibiting behavior of psychopathy. And he's really the ground zero for psychopathy research to show that it can be induced by a traumatic brain injury.
That I've never heard of this case. This is bizarre. Like that is why. Well, I know that a lot of criminals will have a brain injury, and that can be the leading cause of them being normal to all of a sudden having these issues. Well, now for Gypsy Rose, with her microdeletion, which she was born with, obviously she has a small head, and I've often wondered, does this so she was diagnosed with 1q2 1.1 microdeletion, a genetic condition where a small piece of chromosome 1 is deleted in each cell. According to Medline Plus, 1q2 1.1 microdeletion is a chromosome change on the long Q arm of chromosome 1 in the region designated Q2 1.1. This deletion increases the risk of developmental delays, intellectual disability, physical abnormalities, neurological, and psychiatric problems. So now this is the thing too. This is a crazy case, Chris, that I know I've told you about before. I'd love
Yeah.
for you to research this case because she brutally murdered her mother 10 years ago, actually June 10th of 2015. She manipulated an autistic man to do the deed. I speculate she was part of it as well. I'm going to show images of her because you can definitely tell there's something wrong when you look at her. See, that's the poster child on the pamphlet about this, and that's her. They look identical. That's not the same person. She sold this story, Munchausen by proxy, that she was being medically abused by her mother. She only served like 8.5 years in prison. The other man is serving a life sentence. She took a plea deal. Even her own defense attorney said if she had not taken the plea deal, she would probably have gotten the penalty, the ultimate penalty, because the murder was so brutal. So she sold this story, got HBO and all of these different media companies to do these documentaries. And then once she was out of prison, she stupidly released her medical records. And everybody was like, wait a minute, you actually are sick. Like every single thing your mother had done to you medically was because of this chromosome disorder. You are literally sick. You did not suffer Munchausen by proxy. You were sick. You got away with murder. And
Yeah.
now she's running around. She gets off parole on June 25th, and she's running around. I cannot tell you the stuff that she has done online, Chris. It is unbelievable the stuff that she has done online to hurt people. It is, I don't trust her. It's scary. Like the things that she has posted and she's doing, it's terrifying. And she just had a baby too. And I feel like that child is, I told this to another, I did a show with a person who's big into kind of like you. They're kind of the you of this field. And I said, I feel like she's going to reoffend. And she's
Yeah.
not smart. She obviously has narcissism, but she's a
Mhm.
dumb narcissist because she does things that are so obvious. And then she has like a band of flying monkeys that go and literally dox people, threaten people. They're thugs. And so, yeah, I would love for you to look into this case,
Well,
Chris,
it
because
sounds
it's
like she's
wild.
running quite the cult under her watch.
Yes,
And unfortunately, people that have psychopathy also tend to gravitate toward roles like that and use people to do their dirty work for them. That it's a Machiavellian type of behavior. And to
it's
be
crazy.
clear, and I'd like to suggest that your audience read more on Hare's research. It's Hare There are also different gradations to psychopathy. Not everybody that's psychopathy is going to be, for instance, like Michael Madsen's character in Reservoir Dogs. Have you seen
Yeah.
Reservoir Dogs,
Yeah, it's been a
Bryce?
long time, but yes.
Um, they can be family people. Um, they can have excellent interpersonal communication skills and superficially get along with others because they're very cunning, they're very manipulative, they're able to get what they want. But Hare has written quite a few books, and he also did some significant peer-reviewed research that was published in the 70s. And yeah, I mean, if you're into narcissism, you'll also find his examination of psychopathy extremely interesting.
I would, yeah, it's fascinating to see because it's not, my therapist always said, a healthy-minded person is never going to truly understand the way a narcissist works. All we can do is study their patterns and their behaviors, but they
Yes.
don't they don't see you as a human being. They don't feel a lot of times they don't feel that empathy, they don't feel that guilt when they've done something bad, which is why they're good at gaslighting. Whereas a normal person who just tells a lie is not going to typically lean towards gaslighting because they do feel empathy towards the person that they're tricking. Um,
Yeah,
and
and just to clarify, also there's a huge difference between psychopathy and what am I going to say? Sociopathy. Sociopathy is environmental. Psychopathy is genetic, and people constantly conflate the two, and they are not the same thing. And people have to stop doing it, as well as psychopathy not being in the diagnostic statistical manual.
yeah.
It's something that requires an MRI due to brain structural problems, and it requires a qualified person to go through Hare's psychopathy checklist in order to make a correct diagnosis.
I'm actually seeing if they have um, a brain scan up of a narcissist, if they actually have, um, here we go. It's brain scans are fascinating to me when you see
Mhm.
like even trauma in brains, but like a normal brain and NPD brain. So that shows that not there's not a lot of function happening in certain parts of the brain. Um, it's just it's fascinating. And even without brain trauma, you look at like, I mean, this is way before our time, but King Henry VIII and his six wives. You
Mhm.
read in history books, and he was a pretty normal king. I mean, they're all kind of tyrannical at that time period, but he was a normal tyrant until he
Yeah,
had a massive leg injury that
yeah,
wasn't treated, and it got into the bloodstream
yeah.
when he started to go crazy.
I will say from my dad, for instance, he had a lot of problems growing up. I have copies of his childhood grade reports because they were given to my grandmother. She knew that there was a problem. My grandpa could not stand my father. They had a very strained relationship. He was very challenging to parent growing up, but it's written all through his report cards that he was a bully. Uh, and things that he did to other students within his class. My mom noticed that his behavior severely changed after they were married. He liked to play baseball, and he was hit in the face
Oh,
with a baseball, and it broke his nose. And it's so close, um, you know, to brain structures that she believed that it also influenced his behavior.
that's
She
very
noticed she noticed a
observant of your
dramatic
mom.
shift in his behavior almost overnight. And that's why I feel like I have an undergraduate in psychology and I'm not qualified to make a diagnosis, but considering he's a family member and I know the circumstances and his background, I feel like I'm qualified to make the statement about him,
You can
including him not being particularly great to animals
Yeah, that's an
and
interesting
other
one.
red
Gypsy
flags.
Rose.
Yeah,
Gypsy Rose is famous for that with not
really.
being good to animals. Yeah. Um, and I know I was about to say his name, but he gave up a dog too, didn't he?
I'm not sure.
Um, that's very con. That's we see that with serial killers too, that they are abusive towards you. That's kind of for their first victims
I
are
mean, arguably, I'm not going to say I'm there. I think that there are some people out there that are not great to dogs or have done things that are not psychopaths, and they could have been influenced by other environmental factors, including drugs. Like I
yeah.
will frankly say I've interacted with David Berkowitz long enough that I don't believe that he's a psychopath based
No, I
on
don't
his
either.
behavior because psychopaths don't rehabilitate. What the tendency with psychopathy is the symptoms get really bad for a certain period of time, and then they burn out and go into remission, and then they start reappearing, like in the person's late 60s, early 70s. And there's no indication to me that David Berkowitz has the disorder because I see no indication based on my correspondence with him.
Yeah,
I would pick up on it.
I've never thought that either with him. But there was not that wasn't present with him. Now with
No.
borderline, and we start hitting on board. Can you explain to my audience what borderline personality disorder is?
Okay, let me just go over to the blog so I can hit all the checkpoints for it. So, I mean, we were discussing this before the podcast began. I did a article on examining Jeffrey Dahmer. Did Dahmer have borderline personality disorder or did he have psychopathy? A lot of people think that and have said Jeffrey Dahmer has psychopathy. That is clearly wrong. He's documented as having borderline personality disorder. He also had a substance abuse disorder. He was an alcoholic. He was a heavy drinker. That's a red flag for borderline personality disorder. Um, it's also a red flag for psychopathy, obviously, too. But there are other. It's hard. It's kind of hard to tease out for a psychologist unless they really sit down with a person and get to know them because there are overlapping traits between borderline personality disorder and psychopathy. But borderline personality disorder is treatable and it can go into remission. It's completely different. So, in order to diagnose for the disorder, five or more of the following criteria required. So, hysterical or desperate efforts to avert abandonment from others, pathological lying, feigning illnesses, a pattern of volatile and intense interpersonal relationships characterized through binary extremes, ideation, placing a person on a pedestal, and then devaluation, knocking the person off of the pedestal and attacking them, identity disturbance and unstable sense of self, such as changing beliefs, values, behaviors, impulsivity that damages the individual in at least two areas, reckless spending habits, impulsive sexual relationships, substance abuse, binge eating, purging or bulimia, anorexia, reckless driving, etc., suicidal threats, gestures, attempts, as well as self mutilation,
Yeah, I was about to
affective
say cutting. Yeah.
yeah, affective unpredictability with the marked acuteness and mood. So intense dysphoria, irritability, anxiety lasting a few hours to a few days, pervasive feelings of emptiness, extreme anger and difficulty controlling anger, such as frequent displays of rage, incessant rage outbursts, and recurrent physical and verbal fights with others, transient stress-induced paranoid ideation, or severe dissociative symptoms. So in order to meet this criteria, five or more of these boxes need to be checked.
Yeah, borderline personality disorder can be very volatile. It's we were talking about it offline as well. Yeah, we and sometimes it can be mixed with narcissism, but if it's on its own, it's from what I understand, it's easier to treat because a person can become self-aware that they're and from what I understand, Chris, with a lot of borderlines now, it's kind of weird to say this because our emotions are real. Like your emotions are real, but they I think a lot of us know when we feel a rise of emotion and we're able to like not project that. But borderline sometimes will feel that emotion and they'll act on it. Um, is something that was like that, like if they feel jealousy, they feel like they have a
Mhm.
right to act on that versus like just
Um,
being annoyed by it and not, we were talking about a lot of times with borderlines, it's common for, now listen, like if you color your hair, like I was telling Chris, I've been thinking about going darker with my hair for like a year now. I haven't pulled the trigger yet, but we change our hair color a lot as women. We change our hairstyles a lot as women. We grow it out, we cut it, all that kind of stuff. But with borderlines, it's different, Chris. That's a symptom, right? Like it's a constant, like going from different color to different color to different haircut. It's a constant changing of and that probably comes from that empty feeling,
yeah,
that empty sense of self, right?
it's an identity disturbance, and I'll be blunt, I can see it from like 20,000 miles away, as we
Yeah.
were discussing in the podcast. Um, you know, it usually you'll see people that are self-injuring. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be cutting themselves like
Yeah.
others. There are other forms of self-injury, such as, you know, uh, constantly sabotaging yourself. You can see it with people such as like Dennis Rodman and Pete Davidson. As soon as I looked at them and saw their behaviors, I'm like, these two have borderline personality disorder. And I Googled it, and damn, I'm telling you, they both are diagnosed with it. And I was able to tell by their behaviors, and because they have covered themselves almost from head to bottom in tattoos.
Yeah.
And I mean, each to his own, but at some point, you look at that and it turns into an identity disturbance issue, and it can be defined as a form of self-injury.
Yeah, and that's how to make that clear too. Just because you have a lot of tattoos doesn't mean that you have borderline personality disorder. Just
Mhm.
because you change your hair color or style on occasion doesn't mean you have borderline personality disorder. It's like
You're
and
correct.
it's a very erratic disorder. Like they I feel like borderlines act very erratically.
Yes,
I
and you need to check all the other tick
Yeah.
boxes too. I mean, you can look at something like that and say, okay, well, this is a warning sign, but then you have to take everything else into account as well that's listed in my blog. Like for instance, um, a component of borderline personality disorder is having cognitive and perceptual symptoms such as depersonalization, derealization, paranoid experiences. Visual hallucinations can be part of it, muddled thinking, magical thinking,
Mhm.
ideas of reference, odd speech, and disturbed thoughts. And then there's overlap in several other areas with borderline personality, such as avoidant personality disorder, histrionic, narcissistic, schizoid, traumatic, post-traumatic stress disorder, schizotypical disorder, major depressive order, bipolar disorder, and antisocial personality disorder. Um, just as a background on borderline personality disorder, it branched off from the diagnosis of schizophrenia in the late 70s, and the DSM was updated. It's a very poorly understood diagnosis because it's considered to be a personality disorder. And some therapists don't, because it's so poorly understood, they don't really know how to treat it.
Yeah.
The only really true treatment for it that's approved through the American Psychological Association is Marshall Linehan's dialectical behavioral therapy, which is based off of the concept of mindfulness in Buddhist philosophy. That's what she pulled in to her treatment, and then she just westernized it. It's the equivalent. There's another person who did the same thing with yoga nidra
Yeah.
and westernized it um, for the United States government in order to treat veterans.
That makes a lot of sense because of my studies in yoga too. Like that would, if you're able to be self-aware, so if you're able to see these red flags and understand that this is part of a disorder, which is like your brain lying to you, right? So you can start to like control yourself better, if that makes sense. So that makes
Mhm.
absolute sense for me. So from my understanding, so what you're saying that maybe before the 1970s, maybe some borderlines were misdiagnosed as schizophrenics. Was that what was
Yes,
happening? And they started to
yes.
realize there's a difference between schizophrenia where there's more hallucinatory. Um,
Schizophrenia is more severe and pervasive,
mhm,
and it lasts through a lifetime, and it needs to be medicated. Where borderline personality, there are genetic and environmental components to it, but it tends to be isolated to parenting, where
interesting.
if parenting techniques are dismissive, it's more likely for the person to develop the disorder. In addition, there are certain things that can trigger the disorder, such as toxoplasmosis.
What
Um,
is toxoplasmosis?
Toxoplasmosis is a type of parasite that people contracted by eating undercooked pork. You can also contract it by coming in contact with cat feces.
Oh,
It
interesting.
yeah, and it's actually somebody won the Nobel Peace Prize for their research on it because they figured out that people coming into contact with cat feces were more likely to develop schizophrenia.
Well, I guess that cat scratch fever, that's a thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and when cats were domesticated in the United States, rates of schizophrenia went up significantly.
That is fascinating. Well, that makes sense because cat scratch, they are in their litter box. You can get that feces then in your I my last trip to India, my friend Mark and I, on top of working in the slums, we also rescue dogs, and my dog is from India, and we had found a mother and her puppies, and there's these di big ditches in India on the side of it for monsoon season to collect the rain, and when the puppies are born, it's not monsoon season, so the mothers typically have their puppies in these ditches, which is clever because they act like a little playpen that keep the puppies there so the mothers can go off. But anyway, we were climbing in and out of these ditches to get these puppies to take them to the vet, then put them back, and we were just going up and down climbing. And in India, it happens sometimes where men, not women, but men, will publicly go to the bathroom outside, like number two. And towards the end of my trip, I got really, really sick. Like I'd never been that sick before. And I went to the Indian hospital. My fever was the highest it ever been. I was just, I mean, it was awful. To the point where my boyfriend thought he needed to book a ticket to India because he didn't know if I was going to make it. Like he thought something, when I got back home, I didn't know that he was already planning for assistants to take over the business so he could, because he literally thought I wasn't going to make it, but I made it. And when I got back from India, my mother insisted that I go to the doctor here and have some tests run. And so I did. And then like a couple weeks later, I was down in Florida with my boyfriend at his parents' house, and I got a call from my mother that the health department had sent a letter to me, but they had sent it to my parents' house for some reason. You know, sometimes you have different address anyway. And my mother was like, I'm going to open this. And I got scared. I was like, oh my God, it's from the health department. My mother was like, if it was bad news, they would have called you. So let's just open it. And the letter basically wanted me to call them. So then I got really nervous. And so I called them from my phone. I put them on speakerphone. I had contracted a sickness. It wasn't a coli. It was another sickness from human fecal matter. They said the name of it. It was a Latin name. I can't even remember what, I mean, it wasn't E. coli. I know it wasn't a coli.
Was it H. pylori? I think that's
I
how
don't
you
know. It
pronounce
was a
it.
Latin. The doctor was like, basically the reason why I had to call them is because they had to make sure that I didn't contract this from the United States, that there wasn't an outbreak in the United States.
Okay.
And I kept
Okay.
saying, they're asking me all these questions, and I was like, no, I wasn't contagious. This wasn't anything contagious, but they just wanted to make sure that I didn't get sick in the United States. And because I got checked in the United States after I got home, and I was like, no, 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 I just got back from India. That makes in my head I'm thinking I really could have gone the rest of my life not knowing this. Like sometimes ignorance is bliss. Like I didn't need to know that I can check that I took in human fecal matter. And I explained to him, I was like, no, I was climbing in and out of a ditch. We rescued a bunch of dogs. They're in the United States now. I must have just ingested from climbing. It just must have gotten my mouth. And But I was on the phone with them for a while. They had to ask my boyfriend questions because he lives with me. Like, did he travel with me? And he was like, no, I've been here the whole time, just to really reassure them that this was not an outbreak in the United States. That I actually did get this from another country, and I'm not contagious, so I didn't bring anything into the country. And then she explained to me like what was going to happen to me over the next year. And she was basically like, you're going to start to feel better. And then every once in a while, you're going to have to go throw up.
Mm.
And she was right. I would be fine. I'd be teaching my sort, and then I'd have to run to the bathroom and throw up. And it lasted like a year. So that makes sense to me. And what I had ingested of fecal matter must have been such a small particle because I
But
wasn't even aware of it. And when I'm in India, I'm washing my hands constantly. Because I wasn't even aware. It was must have been just a small. So that just shows you like how contagious and how contaminant. I mean, cat, how that can, I mean, that makes sense to me. But that is fat. I did not know that schizophrenia was connected to that. That my stalker, I know I said this last show, my stalker has schizophrenia.
mhm.
And it is terrifying because I notice with schizophrenics versus maybe some other hallucinatory disorders, when a schizophrenic is having a hallucination, it is
Mhm.
nearly impossible to convince them
That's correct.
that it's not real. Where other hallucinatory
Yes.
disorders, you can maybe, there's some self-reflection
Yes, like bipolar disorder. Yes, there is self-reflection.
and they can ask, are you seeing what I'm seeing? But like my stalker believes that she is like the missing niece of Nikola Tesla. She believes she telepathically talks to Trump. She believes she's
Okay.
the military press secretary. She's gotten on her own social media and flung a gun around. Um, she t her voice sounds weird, like you can hear it in her voice, and I learned that's a sign of schizophrenia, where the cognitive connection to the voice starts to like almost sounds like she's
Yes.
got something in her throat, you know?
Yes. Sometimes the voices can sound almost immature and childish. Like the
Yeah,
person sounds more like a 5 to 10 year old rather
yeah.
than sounding like an adult. Yeah,
And
I
this, and
get
I know
that.
schizophrenia gets worse as they get older, correct?
Um, Depending on the person, yes. Like for women, for instance, we had discussed this in a prior podcast. Whenever women's estrogen levels drop during menopause, for estrogen seems to act as a barrier and reduce the symptoms of schizophrenia. But whenever a woman goes through menopause and their estrogen level dips, the schizophrenia symptoms will start to manifest it big time.
Do you see a lot of narcissism with schizophrenia as well? Is that typical?
That's a good question. That's not something that I've ever explored or heard. It's not something that was covered in any of my classes in college.
Because my
But yeah,
stalker
it's
has,
possible. It's possible.
and I just wonder
But
because I don't
it's
know if she's both narcissistic personality disorder and schizophrenic.
I
Because
don't see why, depending on environmental factors or genetic, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to have both. But it's if you're asking if there's overlap in the diagnostic statistical manual for it, not that no, there's not.
so that's my question was because I wonder because she definitely has narcissistic personality disorder too, on top of schizophrenia.
Okay.
And sometimes I wonder if her narcissism, if they're not connected, if she just happens to have both of them, if that's what's exacerbated her schizophrenia and made her hallucinations even worse, and
Hmm.
more threatening because she is a narcissist too. Oh, and guess what, you guys? According to her last, she'll leave like thousands of voice messages in a day. And according to one of the last ones, we're lucky because she's now our next president. She's in presidential training right now. And screw the electoral process where we get to elect people as our leaders. No, she's so that tyrannical, um, in the court for my case, because she started stalking me and started threatening me. And people believed her and they started to kind of threaten me too. And so I had to go to the police. And this court case has gone on forever because she was deemed unfit by the court to stand trial because of her schizophrenia.
Yeah.
So the court, and it's frustrating because the court like delays and they have all these like things that she has to do. Like she has to be medicated, she has to be on medication. She can't touch alcohol or drugs. She can't contact me. Well, she hasn't done all three of them. I still get 150 messages from her a day. A
Mhm.
response to none of them.
My biggest concern, like with borderline personality disorder, and just to address this with your audience, it is improperly diagnosed for a lot of reasons. And I just want to list them off. Psychiatrists and therapists are not properly trained in personality disorders. Psychiatrists and therapists are resistant to personality disorders. Psychiatrists and therapists do not spend enough time speaking to family members, friends, and acquaintance of the individual in order to make a proper diagnosis. And that's probably the most important thing, in my opinion. And then studies have found that people are often not diagnosed with the disorder unless the individual's therapist really does not like the person, because people displaying the symptoms tend to be extremely unlikable.
Yeah.
So you've got to find a qualified therapist that has training in dialectical behavioral therapy, and the therapist has to be open, because a lot of therapists just aren't trained to do this because of privacy,
Yeah.
um, uh, to interact with family members, friends, and acquaintances, because the person might be putting on one face during therapy and the person isn't recognizing the symptom, and the therapist isn't recognizing the symptoms, or the
Right.
psychiatrist. But if they start talking to their family members, friends, and acquaintances, and they're saying this person is doing this, this, and this, and this, a proper diagnosis can be made, and a proper therapy intervention can occur. Like with borderline personality disorder, it doesn't seem to be particularly treatable from a medication standpoint. I mean, it's very resistant. I'm not saying medications don't help, but intensive therapy is more important than medications.
With schizophrenia, would that be flipped, where medication would be more
Yes,
prominent and powerful?
schizophrenia needs to be medicated, yes. And
Yeah.
that's why, David Berkowitz was diagnosed with schizophrenia whenever he was first incarcerated. I don't believe he has
I
it,
don't either. I don't think he does either. Yeah.
because he doesn't take medications, as far as I know, and he would be having symptoms, believe me.
Oh yeah. After my experience with my stalker, like it's gonna take me a lot to it's gonna take a lot to convince me Berkowitz is schizophrenic, because that is not the same. He is not behaving in the same way that my stalker behaves. So
No.
absolutely, yeah. There's some
For the next few months over on the Esoteric Academy, we are going to be looking at the technique of somatic healing. Soma means body, so basically body healing. Through these techniques, we work the body to release any held stress or trauma. If you have been the victim of a narcissist or any other life-changing event that has left you with anxiety disorders like myself, somatic healing would really, really help you and aid you in all the things you're doing to try to get your body regulated again. If you would like to join us on the Esoteric Academy for this special look into somatic helping to help you work through the process of your trauma, you can use the discount code RockerMike at checkout for 20% off your first 6 months at the Esoteric Academy.
There's some sanity. He has sanity. I feel like my stalker has no sanity left in her. Um,
My
but
com
she,
my conversations have been completely sane with him.
yeah,
And there have been other people that have sat down with him, and have stated it's just like talking to, you know, like
your
you and I
neighbor.
are talking.
Yeah, yeah, that's what, and I've never met Berkowitz. I want to make that very clear, but I've watched a lot of interviews, and maybe that's just me being biased because of the trauma that's happened from my stalker and how scared. It's scary when you're dealing with somebody who is hallucinating and doesn't know they're hallucinating, and your safety becomes at risk because they think they're doing the right thing for that. You can't convince them that what they're seeing isn't true and wasn't isn't real, and the voices they're hearing in there. Now with schizophrenia, do borderlines hear voices in their heads too, or is that just schizophrenia?
Borderlines can hear voices in their head dependent on what type of transient stress they're experiencing. Yes. Borderlines can hear the voices. Um, People with schizophrenia can hear voices. People with borderline bipolar disorder can hear voices. Um, it's just far more complicated to diagnose than, just throwing out something online and
No,
and conjecturing what the person has. And you have to really get a qualified psychiatrist. I would argue, I'm not, I have an undergraduate in psychology, but I'm not a huge fan of the field of psychiatry. I think some of them are not trained properly.
right.
And I think the field, with all the advancements that it's made in recent years, it would be better off turning certain disorders over to neurologists.
That is a really good point. That's a really good point to
Yeah.
make. Well, speaking of neurology, I one question I have, because I know a lot of my audience might have this question with voices in the head. What's the difference between like an inner dialogue that you have yourself, a healthy inner dialogue, versus hearing voices in your head? What's the difference?
Um, I would say that I would define it by hearing voices in your head and actually responding to them.
Like that's not your own voice, your own inner thought. So
Mm,
it would be like you're
yeah,
actually hearing a voice that's outside of them. It's like it's not like their inner thought. It's a separate entity. They perceive it as a separate voice.
they perceive it as a separate entity, and I think that there's struggles with that because there are certain cultures that have beliefs in shamanism and psychics, and I do think that those abilities exist because
Yeah,
it's
me too.
been documented way too well in research. And one interesting person to read that's an anthropologist relating to um, those type of occurrences is I. M. Lewis, who has written a lot about trance
Yeah.
and possession. Uh, there are arguments within the field of anthropology and psychiatry that some of these experiences that these other cultures have, that they can just boil it down to psychiatric, um, or other factors involved with psychology. But I think it's more complicated than that.
I
And
do too. Yeah.
I. M. Lewis would be a good person to read.
Because I
Um,
think, you think about stuff like when your phone rings and before you pick it up, you know who it is. Like
mm,
that would be considered a psychic knowing. But for me, whenever that's happened, it's just
yes,
like a nudging. It's not like a voice
yes,
telling me, it's just like an inner knowing. Or like no, or like, in the South, we're big on like having dreams and like hauntings
yes.
and that's not, it's very different than
You're
people.
correct. I've
It's
had things come to me in dreams, and I'm a big dream journaler,
yeah.
and it's worked out for me.
Same,
And it's
you know,
it's been very hard to work through, because sometimes you'll have things that come to you in dreams, and you're not exactly sure what it's trying to relate,
yeah.
and you have to really start researching symbolism
Yep.
in order to make sense, and use trial and error and say, okay, well, I was wrong this time. And I've gotten to the point where I feel like I'm fairly intuitive with my dream interpretations. I'm not 100% right all the time.
But you
But
just
I
hit
mean,
the
there's
nail on
some
the
things
head
that have
though.
come to me in dreams. It's too hard to ignore.
You hit the nail on the head that that's a difference. So I feel like you just said, but I was wrong. You're self-reflecting. You're able to sit back and be like, I
Yes.
think that's the healthy mind is you're like, am I just crazy or did I just get this
Yeah.
bit of information? You're able to self-reflect. Whereas maybe people who it's a disorder, that's missing. Because that is, and again, because the psychic stuff, I have friends who practice voodoo, they have psychic, and it's very different than what we see from my experience with actual personality disorders. There's a responsibility, and we look at blood types too. I've done a lot of Rh negative because I'm Rh negative. I'm O negative, and so I have no antigens in my blood. I've got no Rh factor in my blood, and there is a higher, it's interesting enough, there is a higher percentage of O negatives that have psychic intuition abilities. Is it because there's nothing in our blood? I don't know. Who knows? But and I think our souls do kind of nudge us in certain directions in life because of our life destiny. That's a total, and yeah. So because I got a lot of woo-woo people on this channel, like when you're having dreams about things and you're having feelings towards something. I have a friend, you guys know Jessica Jones, she comes on a lot, who's a remote viewer. That's a
Mhm.
psychic ability, and she's the most grounded, hysterical, level-headed person that you'll ever meet. She's not hallucinating things. I mean, when off, when she's off, when she's not, she's the funniest. She'll tell you the funniest stories. She'll have a beer with you. Just, it's very different than somebody who is hallucinating something
Yes.
and can't snap out of that. They think, they're being told to do something. You know, I had a friend once say, like, if you're a psychic is not being told by a voice to physically hurt someone.
Yes.
Whereas that's a disorder when you're being told to physically hurt someone.
Well, in some cases, I think people would argue that that could also be possession.
Yeah,
So I think that maybe that shouldn't be ignored either.
yeah,
Because I believe David Berkowitz felt like he was possessed
possessed.
from the time he was from the time he was an infant,
Yeah.
possibly prenatally.
I mean, that's the thing with like even with channeling, sometimes you need someone who's more attuned to be able to do like spirit board work because they are, and when they're healthy, when they're grounded, because they are able to discern if is that coming out legit or should we question this? Like they're not
Yeah.
hanging on to that as the word of God, right? Like there's questioning.
Yeah, I will, just to be blunt, I'm not a practicing occultist, pure and simple. I mean, I do occult research. I don't want that confused where people are like, oh, what's going on with her over there?
No.
But I have had experiences throughout my life of things coming to me in dreams, and um, you just learn to deal with it
Yeah.
and try to figure out what's being communicated and do independent research to look to see, okay, well, is this validating out?
And that is again, that's the key, right? That discernment, that
Yes.
being able to
Yeah.
discern to as my boyfriend often says, to see how it plays out without reacting to it, instead of like when people who like channel go out there and say, well, God told me this and this has to be done. It's like I don't trust that, because the people I know who are able to get channeled messages, or who are healers or are psychic, they're never totally, they're like, well, this is what I'm getting. If it resonates with you, great. If it
Mhm.
doesn't, leave it. They're very self-critical in a lot of ways. And I think that shows a huge difference. I mean, listen, I play with tarot cards from time to time. Doesn't mean that I'm going to take what the tarot card said as the word of God and the absolute truth. That
Yeah.
it's just a hobby, and it's just kind of fun to check my own intuition. But I don't use the tarot cards to like dictate, and I don't even play with them that much. I just
Yeah.
occasionally I'll pull them out. It's just more for fun. I know people that will use pendulums to literally ask every question, like and it's like, put the pendulum down and stop. I think that's the difference between a lot of occultists too, is you become so reliant upon something
Mhm.
that it does become your identity versus just listening to your own intuition. And dreams, hey, listen, dreams and psychic stuff could be a form of intuition, a way for people to explain an intuitive hit, whereas that, so I want my audience, because I got a lot of really cool people here like that I think you and me, Chris, both kind of agree, like there's a place for that. And that's very different from like schizophrenia and borderline
Well,
personality disorder.
yeah, and I mean it's even documented biblically. There are of things coming to people in dreams.
Mhm.
So you just can't ignore it. I mean, I can list my best advice to people out there, and I've gotten to the point that I do this. When things come to me in dreams, I will text myself or I'll email myself. So it's documented, it's in writing, because sometimes in the past my husband has had a hard time taking me seriously on some of this, because he my husband is atheist,
Oh,
and
wow. Wow.
he's not gonna change.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it doesn't matter how much you fuss at him and encourage him to go a different route. It just is what it is. And for him to take me seriously on some of this, I've needed to email myself and text myself and then show him afterwards. And I'm like, "Ew, look, do you believe me now?"
I'm
And
such
he's found some of it unsettling.
Yeah.
but he's at where he's at in life. One experience I can say I personally had was when my mother died, and
Yeah.
my cousin had the same problem, and we talked about it. We were both kept awake all night. She was having dreams, I was having dreams. We would both bolt awake, and um, I had a flash of something that was symbolic of death, and I woke up and I started to try to call her about 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and she wasn't answering the phone. And I told my husband about 8 o'clock in the morning. I said, I know my mom's dead. She's not picking up the phone. I've been having dreams all night. He said, you're overreacting. She's fine. And I said, no, I know she's dead. And I went over to her apartment and opened the door and went in, and she was dead.
I think I think that's that tether they talk about in certain cultures, that there's a tether between people. And that's I'm sorry that happened to you, first of all, but I've heard a lot. There's been a lot. That's a common psychic trait, I think, is for um the guy Josh McKay, who does my friend who does my music for this channel. He was in the
Yeah,
band Deer Hunter, but back when he was younger, he was in Alika's Attic, which was the band that River Phoenix. He was really good friends with that family. He lived with the Phoenixes for a while. And when River Phoenix died, he was in another country at that point for some musical stuff, and he had a dream. And he knew when he woke up that River was gone, because River basically came to say goodbye to him in the dream.
yeah,
And then he got the call. My boyfriend was in India in his 20s, and his beloved dog, the family dog, he had a dream one night that Brandy, the dog, came to play with him, and he knew that Brandy was saying goodbye. And he finally got in touch with his family, and she had passed away that night of the dream. And so I
yeah,
do think our souls do come and visit people and say goodbye. Um,
yeah,
and give people that memory and that almost that peace of like, I didn't abandon you, it's just my time. Um,
yeah.
gotta
I will
go.
also say my husband was in deep trouble whenever I found her. I called him, I said, she's dead. And he said, you're kidding me. And I said,
Is he
no. And he
still an
said, oh,
atheist after that?
yeah. I said, yeah, he is, because he's that stubborn. And he
But
said, okay, I'll be right over. And I waited for like 30 minutes, and she lived in a large a senior apartment building, and the police came and they were coming in and out, and she had older residents who were trying to barge in to the apartment to see what was going on. And I was not having a good morning, to say the least.
yeah.
And I also had some premonitions that I won't go into that occurred way before. Um, but my husband lived maybe 10 minutes from her. It took him maybe 45 minutes to get there. I'm like, where is my husband? You know what he did, Bryce?
What?
He stopped by Starbucks on the way there to get himself a coffee and myself a hot chocolate. And he shows up and he's like, here, I brought you a hot chocolate. And I was like, I know. I talked to somebody about it, and I said, well, maybe that was his way of consoling you, because that's how he would want to be consoled. And I get that. But I was like, my mom just died. You wouldn't take me seriously that she died. And you stopped at Starbucks first. And I told my cousin about it. She was like, oh my God, he would have been wearing that hot chocolate if it
Ah!
were me. And I was not happy,
He was probably in
but
shock
I
too,
got
because
past it.
it's a cognitive dissonance, and I typically like having atheists around because they challenge me and kind of keep me grounded, because I can get kind of woo-woo sometimes. But
Yeah.
they kind of give me self-reflection, like maybe this is just how it is, maybe this is just circumstantial. And a lot of atheists I know too, actually, there's some of the atheists I know are really good people, because they don't blame their behaviors on anything else. When they just do good because they know they need to do good. It's not like they're doing something because God commanded it, or it's and maybe I think for some atheists too, that's just their way to reconcile the world. The world is a confusing place, and I believe
Um,
down here with amnesia, where we don't really know, like, why am I here in this body, and
Speaking for my husband, and he might get cranky with me for saying this. I think that he had a lot of childhood trauma related to some things that were going on in the household, and
yeah,
he conflates that with religion.
yeah,
He
I
grew up
get
in a
that.
Southern Baptist home. I would
Get
say
that.
that the home was not necessarily functional. He also doesn't have functional relationships with his siblings
I get
based
that.
on
Yeah.
everything that went on in the home. And it he's just never going to change. He just wants nothing to do with the concept of God or religion, and that's his choice. He's had people who have tried to persuade him otherwise. David Berkowitz and I have talked about it in letters, and he has said that openly in letters that he would pray for him. But
Yeah, and I think in
yeah,
that
he's just he's
situation,
just not he's just not open to it. And I mean, David Berkowitz also understands that. I mean, he's run across I believe the same obstacles probably
and I think that
when
God
interacting
gets
with
it.
other inmates that are resistant.
I think God gets it. I think God is a loving, merciful God, and I think God knows that religion has been twisted to serve the narcissism of man in a lot of ways. I find a lot of I was lucky I grew up because in the South there's like two forms of Christians. In the South there's the real fundamentalist, usually Baptist and Pentecostal, and then there's like the Christian I grew up, Presbyterian, where it was like, you know, you go to church, but you're also talking about ghost stories and doing root work with your voodoo worker, and like, it's a little bit more eccentric. And then you have the non-eccentric where it's very strict and there's a lot of abuse happening in the name of God. See, that's one thing that drives me crazy personally is I cannot, it's a huge pet peeve of mine when people use God as a weapon.
Hmm.
That to me is a form of manipulation when people start to like make you feel like you're not good enough for God because of some rule created by a particular flavor of religion. And I'm not a fan. I don't consider myself to really have a religion. I just have a relationship with God. That's it. And so I get it. And I feel like,
I would agree with you. Weaponizing God or
yeah,
religion in order to take control over a person or a conversation is not productive.
it's not okay. And I feel like when people like your husband grew up in that environment, I think God understands like when they have to, for their own sanity, have to like reject that. I think that God has mercy on that in that situation because I think God also wants us to be happy and wants us to be productive. And if that means walking away from a structure of religion, then I think that's fine. And I think there's probably a lot of inner turmoil in his mind when something like this happens and his wife is able to like um, predict something in a dream, and that there may be something that there's something bigger than us. It doesn't necessarily mean, and maybe that's his own journey, right? Like it doesn't mean you have to be in a religion, you know. But yeah, it's what Ram Dass, one of my favorite teachers, used to say, everything is just God dressed in drag. It's just God dressed in drag, like everything is God. And so when you understand that, you don't need the confines of a man-made rule system. And I'm sorry your husband went through that abuse, that hardship as a child. That really is hard when kids go through that with strict religious upbringing. That's rough. And so I'm sorry he went through that. But I hope to God, yeah, I probably would have thrown the Starbucks on my boyfriend too if he had done that to me. But
Yeah, I try not to be that bad. I'm not going to say I don't lose my temper here and there and let him have it, but I have never tossed a drink at him. Like I that's a line in the sand for me because my father and my stepmom got into a fight once over something, and he took a cup of hot coffee and threw it in her face like he was effing Frank Sinatra.
oh my God. Well, isn't that a
And
sign
she
of like borderline too, like throwing things?
um
Like being volatile, physically volatile? Because I've
volatile.
never,
I mean, yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, we don't
and the
really
thing
fight
is,
that
he
much.
ruined my day because she was supposed to go out shopping with me, and we were going to do some things for, it was whenever I was first married. uh, and it was related to my wedding. And she was supposed to go with me. And she called me hysterically crying and said, "Your father threw hot coffee in my face." And I got over there, and my stepsister also came over, and we just kind of sat there, and our arms were crossed, and we were just both really ticked off. Um,
And narcissists will do that too. They'll ruin an event. That's, they'll sabotage.
Thank you for acknowledging that, because I felt like that was part of the problem.
They will.
Did they get into a fight over something petty? Yes, but it didn't warrant what they were fighting over didn't warrant hot coffee in the face. I believe that he personally sabotaged her going out with me and shopping,
They'll do that.
because that he had a pattern of behavior all through my childhood of pulling stuff like that.
I will say, yeah, that's very typical of a narcissist. When my sister got married years ago, I was in my 20s, she was in her 20s. My stepmother, I was telling you, narcissist, borderline personality disorder with narcissism. And at my sister's wedding, I'm always I'm the main scapegoat. There's a lot of scapegoats, but I'm the main one that she goes after, my stepmother. And at my sister's wedding, she broke down crying because she was worried about it. And I remember I was like, I told my sister, I was like, I'm not going to do anything. And my sister was like, I know you're not going to do anything, but she always attacks you. And it's my
Mm-hmm.
wedding. And I feel like she's going to do something to try to like make it about her because that's what they do. And the only thing she did that was she walked down the aisle barefoot, which she shouldn't have done because it was a very classy place. But if that was the one thing she did to draw attention to herself, whatever, that's the least concerning to go down the aisle barefoot. But that causes stress for people when you know that this is what narcissists do, that they are constantly trying to sabotage, with Gypsy Rose, social media, her sister, she is a half sister. And every time her half sister, who's beautiful, by the way, it's very obvious she's jealous of her half sister. But every time her half sister posts something about her life, like graduating or moving with her boyfriend, Gypsy will also post something. Like the last one was her sister posted a TikTok of her moving in with her boyfriend, and the same day, Gypsy Rose posted a picture of engagement ring to fool people into thinking she got engaged. It's this is what narcissists do. They can't share the spotlight with somebody else, or can't handle, they sabotage people. And I don't know why they do that. Like, you going shopping with your stepmother has nothing to do with your dad. Like, that's most parents would be happy if their second wife or husband was involved in their kids' lives and doing stuff like that.
Well, it helps them regain control of the situation. And frankly, I never, from the time I was a child, had any type of relationship with my father based on how he treated myself and others.
Yeah.
So, would I want him to go along with me for an event like that? No, but that's what ended up happening is she refused to go, and she said, "Your dad can go with you." And I had to go shopping with my dad um for my wedding, and I was not happy about it.
I wouldn't be either. Well, and that's the hard cold truth. I saw Dr. Romani once, and if I'm paraphrasing, the narcissist specialist, and my therapist kind of said the same thing, where she's like, you don't have to forgive. Like, people say, oh, I gotta forgive, you gotta forgive. No, you don't have to forgive. You can move on with a person, but you can, if someone has hurt you, you can hold on. There's a boundary there. And my therapist was the one that really made me see that it was okay for me to put a boundary up with my dad's married to a woman that's made my life a living hell. And I don't need that in my life. For her, I know she's jealous of my sister and me because we existed before her. And we're a sign that my father is not just hers. At my grandfather's funeral, I was so unbelievably mad when my sister is the only one of this generation who's had children. I have three male cousins and one female cousin, none of whom have had, and myself, they're younger than me. They haven't had children yet. I haven't had a child. And my sisters had four kids. By the time my grandfather passed away, there were only two of them though. And in the funeral pamphlet, my stepmother's grandchildren were listed as the great grandchildren.
Hmm.
And that infuriated me. That infuriated me because what about the actual great grandchildren? What about
Yeah.
the actual that my sister brought over there all the time? When my grandfather was on his last leg, my sister was up there all the time with those kids. So those kids could spend time with their great grandfather. And I know for a fact that my grandparents did not like my stepmother. They did not. They listen. My grandmother, before she died, had dementia, and the one
Yeah.
sassy thing about dementia is they start saying what they really feel. And I have never heard so many curse words come out of my grandmother's mouth revolving my stepmother. My grandmother is from South Georgia. She plays the piano. She's as prim and proper as they come. The minute her dementia started to really kick in, I didn't even know my grandmother knew the C word until she called my stepmother that.
Oh yeah. See you next Tuesday.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have never even heard one curse word come out of my grandmother's mouth my whole life. And she literally said Shiza, and she said the word, and I was like, part of me wanted to laugh, part of me was relieved. I was just like, so
Yeah. Whenever I start hearing people drop that word, I'm like, oof.
I
Yeah,
know that's a powerful word.
somebody has really made them mad. It's that is not a word that I use. I think
Me
it's
either.
probably the worst word in the world.
I never
But
use that word. I'll drop an F bomb, but
when people drop it, I will occasionally laugh because I know that they've gotten that mad at the person.
and that was my southern grandmama who played the piano for church and was, what can I get for you? How can I, are you hungry, sugar? Let me get you, just very good and nice and proper and southern, always had her pearl necklaces on. And to hear her say that, it was like, I just knew, like you said, that my stepmother had pissed her off so much, had done so
Yes.
much shit to her, and she had kept it together all those years. And the minute it came out, and it was amazing, it came out in front of me because I'm
Yeah.
I'm the main scapegoat. And so that was like a God wink for me, because with dementia, I don't know if she even realized. I mean, I think in her sanity she knew that I was the main scapegoat.
Yeah.
Even my dad's sister stepped in once. One of my dad's sisters, who is a psychiatrist, stepped in once with me and said, listen, darling, she was like, you're the child in this relationship and you're the only one fighting for this relationship, and I'm just telling you, your father should, I mean, my father never doesn't call me on my birthday. And when I turned 40, I remember because my boyfriend's only met my dad like once in passing at like a funeral. And when I turned 40 and I didn't get a phone call from my dad, my boyfriend was like really in shock. Like, I was like, no, it's just he's married to this woman. She blocked my number a long time ago. My dad owns a veterinary clinic. He's a veterinarian. And growing up, like I knew the number to the back office. So like if I needed to call my dad, I'd call the back office. Well, I called my dad. This was years ago. I called my dad at the back office, and I know all of his employees. They've worked for my dad for years, so they all know us. And will talk to them for a little bit when I come to the phone, and they'll tell me if my dad's available or if he's with a client, he'll call me back, whatever. Well, one of his employees chatted with me for a bit. She goes, Bryce, I have to tell you that your stepmother told us that if you or your sister are to call, we're to not let you speak to your father. So she would come into my dad's office
Huh.
and threaten his employees who had known my sister and me since we were children, like little children. When we would go as kids to my dad's office, to the vet clinic, we were instructed, like we would get in a lot of trouble. Like when we came into the clinic, we were instructed to go immediately to my dad's office and not hang around. Like the back door was the door why is that? Because there are needles everywhere, there's dogs medicated everywhere. It's dangerous for little kids to be running around. Everybody's working. There's a lab, there's an operating room, sick dogs, sick cats. And my mother would be like, you girls go immediately to his office. Do not run around. And so we would go say hello to whoever said hey to us. Then we go sit in my dad's office and wait for my dad to come to the office. That was out of respect to the clinic. That was out of respect to my father, out of respect to his employees, out of respect to the animals and the human clients. But then I heard that her grandchildren come into my dad's office and run amok, just run amok in that clinic. And I'm like, there are needles in that. This is a veterinary clinic. There are sick dogs that are coming out of anesthesia from surgery. What do
Mm.
you, but but for my father, it's probably better just to let them run amok than try to deal with my stepmother and get them to behave themselves in the clinic.
Yeah.
But that's just how they are, and sometimes that's the best thing to do is just to put that boundary up. with
I I
narcissists.
mean that's kind of where I hit. I mean, I try to maintain a relationship with my father for years. Just mostly because of my mom. My parents divorced whenever I was in middle school, and I wrote a blog on it, but not to go into it too much further. But after my mom died, I finally felt comfortable cutting my relationship off with my dad.
It's just healthier that way. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, you hate to get to that point because I mean, I will say that he does have good attributes.
yeah.
He's not 100% just a schmuck. He was a hard worker. He went to work every day. Um, there are other aspects in his life that are positive. He's got an excellent sense of humor. He's probably one of the funniest people I've known in my life, but at the same time, that's part of the charisma.
Yeah,
A
absolutely it is.
person can be extremely funny, um,
They pull you in.
but they also use the humor to also degrade people.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say that it's probably one of the funniest things he ever said, but he was also doing a little bit of a slap to my ex-husband and my stepmom. We were over at the house. We were hungry. They were going to go out and get pizza. My ex-husband was directionally challenged,
So is my
is to
boyfriend.
this day, could get lost in a box. My
Same with my
stepmom,
boyfriend because same with
my stepmom's the same way. Not everybody is great with directions.
yeah.
Anyhow, we're sitting there. They're gonna go get pizza. My stepmom invites my ex-husband to go with her, and they leave. And as soon as they walk out the door, my dad looks at me and he said, "You realize we're never going to see them again, right?"
That I swear to God, that is my boyfriend too. I tease him till because he literally same thing. If he didn't have his GPS on his phone, he probably would have gone to work this morning and not come back home. Like
Yeah,
he would have ended up in South Carolina or something.
yeah. So I mean, I'll give my dad credit. He did make me laugh a lot
Yeah.
growing up, but after living on that kind of emotional roller coaster where it's up and down and up and down, and the person uses it as a control
Yep.
mechanism, but
Mhm.
at some point you just take your hands and just dust them off and say, I'm
I'm done.
finito.
I need peace.
I don't need it. I don't need it anymore.
And I think too, and I have to go soon, but I think too, one thing especially with like love relationships, and this is something that my therapist taught me. Sometimes I think when we look with narcissists in love, especially as girls, I think we're looking for like the passion and the drama, and we think that's love. But one thing I've realized is like the healthy relationships are kind of boring. And that's how like my boyfriend is the most grounded man you'll ever meet. And we don't fight that much. We have disagreements, but it never
Mhm.
escalates to a fight, right? Because he's had a lot
Yes.
of therapy as well. And actually it's kind of funny, especially right before I start my period. I'm always like kind of trying to pick a fight. And he'll be like,
Yeah.
I'll be like mad about something. He'll be like, well, I can see your point of view. And I'm like, no, fight back. Like, no, stop being so grounded. So, I think sometimes we get stuck in these like emotionally abusive relationship with narcissists because we think that we confuse that up and down and that charisma as seduction and
Yes.
passion when it's
Yes.
actually toxicity. It's toxic.
I agree. And I'll just flat out say, I think maybe this is one of the reasons why I really admire David Berkowitz. I obviously don't put him up on a pedestal. I want people to be clear about this. But compared to what I've been through, like with my father and some other experiences, I see somebody who has been self-reflective and capable of change and
Yeah.
capable of dealing with conflict because we've even had some disagreements
Yeah.
in correspondence, but we're able to effectively work through what we're discussing without um, it turning into drama, you know?
Name calling and going to
Mhm.
attacking. And that's one thing too with narcissists, like we were saying, like I, when you're talking, when you disagree with somebody over a specific subject, keep it at that subject, agree to disagree.
Yes,
Don't go into like demoralizing that person's character. Like that's and I feel like that's very prominent in our society today, where I see it in my comment section where you might disagree with someone,
yes,
you might say my favorite color is purple, my favorite color is red, and all of a sudden you're a bigot because your favorite, and they go immediately to your character instead of
yes.
actually just saying, okay, well, cool, let's agree to disagree. Um,
Yeah.
and
And
it's
he's also one of these people that he's able to admit when he's wrong.
yeah. That's not
And
a narcissist
yes,
then, is it?
that is correct.
That is self-reflection.
Yes. And he's documented as apologizing for behaviors.
Yeah.
So that's also not narcissism or
No,
psychopathy, I would say.
it's not like Manny's apology where it's motivated by self-interest. It's a genuine, like heartfelt, I feel really bad about this, and I'm going to do everything in my power to not to course correct this. Please help me. If you catch me doing this again, please stop me. Like, I'm so sorry. I did not make you, that really taking that accountability, not like I'm sorry, but or we both were wrong. No, it's like I'm really sorry. And that's that's definitely, so for the young girls out there watching or boys out there, if you want a healthy relationship, you're going to need to be with somebody who's healthy, and those relationships are not going to be the most passionate. They're going to be a little bit like meh. But that is, as a 42-year-old woman who had actually I had a history of dating narcissists in my 20s, and I actually dated a narcissist and got engaged to a narcissist and almost was killed by a narcissist one night. That really is what put me into trauma therapy. I was
Mm.
strangled one night because I found out he was cheating on me, and I didn't know that with I didn't know he was a narcissist. I didn't know what that really was. And I confronted him, and I know you don't confront narcissists because they will react. I mean, his eyes went black. It was crazy. I had to call 911, and that's what put me into trauma therapy. That's where I really learned a lot and learned where that comes from. And
Yeah.
after I went through my own healing, that's when I met my boyfriend. And so that's when I realized, oh, I've reached a level of healing if I'm now attracting men who are actually not, are they healthy? Like I know he's not going to cheat on me. He leaves his phone sitting around all the time. Like
They
he's not.
have a very big problem with envy,
Yeah.
and they also have a problem if you shame them excessively. You have to be very careful with excessive shame because it can cause a problem.
Well, they also are very much sexual deviants too. That's another side effect sometimes of narcissism. And I think a part of that, and that's why a lot of narcissists do cheat a lot. I think that's because they don't have a sense of self, and so they're looking for that supply, that narcissistic supply,
Yeah.
where they're not considering how their partner feels, or that their partner's being faithful, and they're.
That's interesting that you bring that up because I was in a relationship with somebody in the early 2000s for about a year that I would consider to be a raging narcissist. And I probably dated him for too long because I was trying to correct issues with my dad.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
it's how
And
that plays out is interesting, isn't
he was a pathological cheater. I mean, he had done it to other women,
it?
including his ex-wife, and then I found out he was also doing it with me. And he was doubling down and trying to deny it and gaslight me. And I
Yeah.
caught him red-handed with a lot of. It wasn't just like one woman, it was multiple.
Yeah, when you catch them and they freak out and they can't get around it, that's when he just grabbed me and grabbed my neck,
Yes.
and because they've been caught, and it's that shame that they know they're cheating, but they're trying to get that fill from other women or men if it's a woman, and they're not. So for women out there, like if you're with a compulsive cheater, it's not you, it's something in them that's broken.
Oh,
It's not you.
well, through the attack, it helps them to regain control over the person.
I would have died that night if it wasn't for his dog shat on the floor when it happened. He got so scared. And when the
Hmm.
dog shat on the floor, he dropped me on the ground. And that's when I grabbed my phone and called 911 quickly. So the dog saved my life. That dog,
Wow.
Bo, saved my life. I really believe that. Like if he, and the fact that the dog did that, I think that dog had been with him for a long time. I don't think he had ever seen it. It scared him, the dog. It scared the dog. So
Yeah.
I really am grateful that the
It
dog.
makes you wonder what he was doing to the dog in private,
Yeah, I've
if that's
worried
what the
about that.
dog did. Yeah.
I doubt the dog's still alive at this point. Even if he had a healthy life, he would be too old at this point. But I've thought about that since then. Like I've worried about that. I mean, my boyfriend cares for my dog just as much as I do. He makes his own my dog is like the most spoiled dog ever. He gets homemade food all the time and lots of pets and loves. And so and I see
Yeah.
that with my boyfriend and the way that he cares for my dog. And it tells a lot about a person, the way they're able to care for something that is dependent upon them and vulnerable. Listen, I've said that about my boyfriend. The first time my boyfriend spent Christmas Eve with my family years ago, my niece, who is now almost 11, she was probably about 2 at the time. And it was a Christmas Eve dinner, and she brought a bunch of dolls with her to preoccupy herself, to play. And she went to my boyfriend and like climbed up in his lap and like put her dolls on the table in front of my boyfriend. And my boyfriend just sat there with her all night, didn't complain, and just played dolls with her. And I could
Mhm.
tell it wasn't him trying to impress my family. That wasn't it. And the fact that my niece was like so willing to get in his lap, and that was the person she picked at 2 to play with, that spoke a lot to me about his nature because kids can read that, and she felt comfortable with him. And when my niece, funny story, when she was first learning to go to the bathroom on her own as a big girl, my sister sent me a text one day and she was like, hey, can you FaceTime? Jacqueline just went to the toilet and she wants to tell you. And so I was like, sure, I FaceTime Jacqueline. And when she got on the FaceTime, she did not want to speak to me. She wanted to speak to Todd. She was like, I poo poo potty, Todd. I poo poo potty, Todd. Like she was so excited to tell him that she poo. I was like, I wish we had recorded that so that when she gets married, we can play that at her reception. I poo poo potty, Todd. And now that I have another niece, she also is very comfortable with Todd. And when she was born, when she was really little, my sister had her 2 other kids. There was one, we were on a trip and like he literally held her for like an hour. Like so everybody kind of forgot about her because they were chasing the other kids. And he just kind of sat there and held this baby. And I was like, that just speaks when you see those mannerisms coming out, when you see that children are comfortable with the person, animals are comfortable with the person, they don't have a lot of drama with people. They have long lasting friendships. That's a pretty safe bet that they're a pretty healthy person. And of course, you're going to have
Yeah.
disagreements. That's normal. There are things he does that annoy me. There are things I do that annoy him. You know,
If a person doesn't pass the sniff test with a dog with me,
that's a problem.
there's a problem. My ex-boyfriend and I, like my mom had said, she said there's something wrong with him, Christina. She laughed so hard with this. Um, I had a little Pomeranian. Uh, my ex-boyfriend came over to pick me up. She did not like being left in the apartment a lot, so I just assumed that it had to do with abandonment issues. But he went over to her and he was like, "Come here, Peaches." And she looked at him and she just like growled.
Oh,
And then
wow.
and then she started walking down the hallway. And as she was walking down the hallway, she growled louder and louder and louder. And she got to the bedroom and she climbed under the bed. And then she just, I mean, it was the worst dog chatter you've heard in your life. She sounded like she was chewing him out.
So
And he
she
was
was
like,
she was warning you.
"Oh, I've never seen her do that with somebody before." And that's what my mom said. She said, "Peaches is smart. She's warning you.
She's
There's
warning you.
she said, he's off, Christina. He Peaches can't stand him." And my ex-boyfriend thought it was hysterical. He was like, "Wow, she really doesn't like me taking you out of this apartment
You're like, no,
and
bro,
her
bro,
being
I think it's just you she
separated."
didn't like.
And it's like, no. And that's kind of what I thought at the time. And then I'm like, no, Peaches was just a better judge of character than I was.
They can smell it, I think. They have a way of smelling. I think it is a sniff test, right? And it's funny because my boyfriend is the one that makes Robbie's food, and I can make Robbie's food if I need to, but he really enjoys it. Like he likes to cook. And
Uh-huh.
so when my boyfriend's at band practice or something and he's running a little bit late, Robbie, my dog, will start to panic a little bit. Like you see him
Uh,
kind of pacing because he's like,
uh,
oh shit, she's gonna have to do it. Like I don't know, because yeah. So they're funny, they're dogs. So dogs and kids, and again for the young girls out there, listen, ladies, like you want to be with a man that you can trust, that you're comfortable with, that is going to mesh well with your family, that's going to be easygoing in a lot of ways and go with the flow, and it's not going to sabotage you, going to support you and love you. And this is an important conversation, especially for the younger generation, to avoid some pitfalls. But I've actually got another call I have to hop on soon, Chris. Is there anything you
Okay.
can say in closing, or should we do a part two, or see what
Um,
our audience say,
I
or?
mean, if you want to do a part two, that'd be fine with me. But I'm fine with just this one. I would recommend reading the following blogs if you want more information. My blog on narcissism, and then the more recent one about what an apology is, and then as well the Jeffrey Dahmer blog.
I'll tag those down below, you guys. And please make sure you're subscribed to Chris's blogs too. And as always, like, leave comments, share it, because that helps get her work out. And I really would love for you, Chris, to look at the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case. It's wild from a psychological
Okay.
perspective, and how they've doubled down on this Munchausen by proxy story, even though it's released that she wasn't. It's crazy. And what she did too, I feel like David Berkowitz and Nicholas Godejohn are kind of in the same situation. Nicholas Godejohn,
Hmm.
her person, did contribute to the unaliving of her mother, but he was manipulated into it, and he's the one paying the price. Where I feel like David wasn't the only one involved in Son of Sam, but yet
Yeah.
he's the one paying the price for it.
I
And
plan on taking a course on cults and charisma in the fall, just
oh, I can't
because.
wait. That would be
So I want to maybe I might hold off on looking at her case until taking that course and then
yeah,
starting to look into her,
because you have to
because
take the
it
media
sounds like,
bullshit.
based on my own experience reading about cults, it sounds like she's got a little bit of a cult following.
She does. And they're all young girls too. And
Yeah,
the girls are commenting, I wish I could murder my mom. You're so brave, because they
yeah,
can't go on a date with a boy,
yeah.
but that would be so interesting. Well, guys, I have to hop. This was an awesome episode, Chris. You guys, please, and share if you want to share in the comment section your experiences and any healing words of advice you have for other people with narcissists. Please feel free to. You don't have to, of course. You can share whatever you want to share. But if you feel like you want to contribute to the conversation, and share some of your experience and what helped you to get your power back, please feel free to do so. We'll
Sure. And I mean, my blog, Medium also allows for comments. You don't have to be a member to read the blogs. I do not believe that you have to be a member to leave
no,
comments.
yeah,
So they're also free to leave comments on my blogs. But if it turns into a toxic dump site, obviously your comments are going to get deleted, because I let that go on too long in one instance where a person came in under a fake account, and John Mitchell also got involved and was arguing back and forth with the person because it really upset him based on his own experiences,
yeah,
what the person was saying to me, and as well as the fake name that the account was under. And I finally just deleted the comment and blocked the person because it upset John so bad, and I feel like I owe him an apology for that. But I also feel like the comments needed to get documented.
yeah. That, and I'm the same way, Chris. Like I said, I don't mind when people have constructive criticism or they have a different opinion. But when you start attacking somebody, either in my case, either me or my guest, or anybody else in
Mhm.
the comment section, and it goes below the belt, that's when I will block, because
Yeah,
bullying is not acceptable. Abuse is, we're trying to heal from abuse, understand abuse. We don't want to propagate it here. And so, you're free to have a different opinion about something, absolutely, but keep it on the
sure.
subject. Don't attack somebody's, with the Manny situation. I don't really care that Manny believes that David was the lone gunman. Like, that's not what I don't care that. What I care about is the way he treats people who disagree
Yeah,
with.
I mean, if you want to argue that David was the lone shooter, cool, but also act like an adult. And if you're gonna comment, make the comments constructive criticism. Don't just don't start attacking the person on an individual basis,
Yeah, I mean,
and
difference.
unless you think it's a moment for growth, like with this podcast. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, right. Like, this is a constructive, like, course correction. These are the
Yeah,
traits we're seeing. And you even said you hope he gets help. I
I
mean, listen,
do. And I've tried to address some of these issues with him, via email, and it hasn't worked out. So at this point, based on his behavior and how he has tried to discredit and shame me publicly, I feel like I need to make a statement. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
No, you're not, Chris, you're not abusive to people. And I have never seen that. I've never thought that of you. You're
no,
using actual evidence and fact and rebuting things and making people aware of stuff. And, it's okay to have disagreements. My boyfriend and I are both registered under two political parties, if people can believe that. We're both
yeah,
registered with different, and we have a very functioning, healthy relationship. You know, he, there's many differences we have, and it's cool because we have the same moral compass, though. That's the most important thing. We do have the same moral compass, but
hmm,
it's okay for us to disagree on certain things. And that's, we can have different disagreements, but we always respect each other. And that's what this person is missing. And I think that's what a lot of narcissists are missing, because it's just because, and man, if you're listening, just because we're not upset because you think David was the only person responsible. I could care less. I couldn't care less. Um, if you think David, that's your opinion and you're welcome to have it. And a lot of people do have that opinion. That doesn't bother me. If you were a nice person, I would not even, I would go get a beer with you. Like that wouldn't bother me at all. But the fact that you actually verbally attack people, especially the way you speak to women, just because they have a different opinion from you speaks more about your character. And that's the problem. And that's what you need to course correct. If you want to have friends in this world, you got to be a friend. Treat others the way you want to be treated. I have so many friends that have different opinions on me politically or religiously. We're polar opposites, but even though we might disagree politically or religiously, we're still good friends, and I still really love those people, and they make me laugh, and they're good people. We just have slightly different views on certain topics, and that's okay. It's okay, Manny. It doesn't, just because we have a different opinion does not make you any less of a human being. You are not Son of Sam. That is, your research is not you. Right? And, and,
well,
and opinions are like
mm.
assholes. Everyone's got one, right? And they're all subject to change.
Well, my biggest problem with him is the disinformation and misinformation he spreads, as well as the attacks that he makes against others, including David Berkowitz, and beginning to troll his Christian supporters on
That's
X
terrible.
and
Yeah, leave them
elsewhere. I mean,
alone.
to me, even drawn the line with one of the previous people that he worked with that had worked with him on the Savino case, who does not believe David Berkowitz had anything to do with Savino, and that Manny and the law enforcement have falsified the narrative.
Which I believe. I
Yeah.
kind of agree with that too. But
Okay.
that's not okay. Like that's just not, and to put disinformation out and then attack, to me, is a form of gaslighting. And
Yes.
it's we all get information wrong every now and again, but most of us, when we put wrong information out, don't realize that's what we're doing. And when we realize it, we course correct and we retract what we said and we make it clear that we were mistaken, right? Because it was an honest
Mhm.
mistake. But when you're knowingly putting out false information, that's when it becomes, in my opinion, a form of gaslighting and manipulation. Because why are you putting out false information? To manipulate. And that's not okay. And it's okay. I just so Manny, the issues that I personally have with you, I think for most people, it's not your opinion on Son of Sam. It's your behavior. That's it. And don't go bullying people. Like, honestly, if you truly believe that Berkowitz was the lone person, then why do you care what other people believe? Why do you care to get in their comment section? Manny, I'm not a huge fan of the church. I'm a huge fan of God, but I'm not a huge fan of the church. You don't see me over on church YouTube channels leaving comments. I don't need to
No.
do that. I don't need to bother people like that. That's not okay. Just because I'm not afraid of the tactics some religions use to bully doesn't give me the right to then go bully. So I keep it on my channel. I don't need to go on other people's channels. So Manny, again, I hear you're really good at yard stuff. So focus on what you're good at and find that sense of self, dude. Like, who are you apart from your image online? Like when you turn the lights out at night, who's Manny? Like, find that sense of self, my friend, and be able to rest into that, because all this other stuff is just drama, and it's not it's not fair to people. It's not fair that they should be afraid to express their opinion over a case that none of us are even involved in. Like, none of us were there for it, because they're afraid that you're going to dox them. And that's another thing too.
Yeah.
Because I know I have to hop off soon, but don't dox people. That is a felony in some states. But just
It's a federal law now.
good.
And I just want to put this on the record. His next go-to will probably be, oh well, my narcissism was weaponized, and um I don't know what to tell you there. Um he's responsible for his own behavior.
Absolutely is. And doxing people, like, don't knowingly, that's so cruel. That's evil to do that. That's cruel, that's
Hmm.
evil. Do not put people's addresses out. If people go by a fake name or don't show their face, don't do that. Don't there's a podcaster I love listening to here on YouTube. He's not actually, he covers a lot of Gypsy Rose, but he uses a fake name and a little icon, and I really enjoy listening to him, and he's really inspired me because he's been on YouTube for a long time. So I've learned a lot about how to handle trolls through him too, how he handles his trolls. But listen, I don't need to know who his name is or what he looks like. That's not important. And I would never, even when the first time we filmed Chris, we had to make sure your name was changed in the Zoom. I would never put somebody on air that I know doesn't want their name, because that's, I respect people's privacy. Respect people's privacy, Manny. Respect their boundaries. Don't put people's private information out. Don't put their addresses out. Don't do that. Not only is
Yeah,
it,
I mean, he edited out his own address. I
eh,
mean, he knows better.
he knows
He didn't
better.
want to reveal his own address, but he publishes mine
Right.
and then takes it down within about 24 hours. I mean,
So he did the damage, then whoopsie. Like Manny, like I would never, Manny, if had someone sent me your address, I would never put that. Even though I don't like you, I would never put your address out there for the world because I'm a decent human being. Because I have a conscience and I have empathy, and I would never do that. I've been doxxed before. It's
oh,
not fun.
yeah. And I'm sure the next thing he'll go for is, well, they're attacking my dad. Well, you know what? Based on his behavior, people have questions about his dad's background at this
I do
point.
too. I have questions about
And
that
I mean,
background as well.
he flat out denied on numerous occasions through numerous outlets that his dad did not do PR for law enforcement. And now all of a sudden, once he went on to Sal Greco's show to promote Savino, now he's admitting that his dad did PR for the PBA, which is the Police Benevolent Association. So I mean, people have memories. People have been screen printing and downloading his podcast and saving his podcast in order to demonstrate that he can't keep his story straight. And
The
at some
lies,
point,
yeah.
he's gonna have to start taking accountability for his own behavior and stop shifting blame to other people and making himself look like a victim.
Manny, if you tell the truth, you never have to remember anything. Simple as
Exactly.
that. And honestly, this background with his father is what makes me believe, in my opinion, that he's controlled opposition. That's the main thing that really makes me feel like he's controlled opposition. And Manny, just a little heads up, bro. As a friend, as a human being, I work with whistleblowers a lot with these organizations. If someone's paying you to do this, they're eventually gonna throw you under the bus. They don't care about you. They're using you. So just watch yourself. Like just be a good human. Like just do human things. Like where's your humanity? Like treat people with respect. It's okay if we have a different opinion over a case. Don't dox people. Don't body shame women. I've seen that before where you've body shamed women. And listen, my friend, no offense, you're body shaming women. You're not much of a looker either. So don't throw stones if you can't take the hit back, because that's not okay. And the women you body shamed were beautiful. So, if Mike was laughing about how he called my channel an obscure channel, but bro, like I got a lot more subscribers than you, and that's okay. I don't really care about numbers anyway. I've never cared about numbers, and I am shadow banned, but I'm on multiple platforms. That's what you don't understand, Manny, is I'm not, YouTube and Rumble are just like more marketing for me. That's more how I market the other
Now,
major platforms that I go on.
the body shaming, I'm assuming you're referring to Cecilia Davis.
I think so. As a female, Mike told me about it, and that just really
Yes,
pissed me off.
a lot of people are very upset about that.
And but from what Mike said, she's a beautiful woman.
Yeah, yeah.
And listen, Manny, if you go to body shaming me, you can't see Chris, but if you try to listen, both Chris and I have men in bed with us every night, the same men. So obviously there's a man out there that thinks we're attractive. So, it's not cool, man. Like I would never body shame another person. Like I'm just throwing it back to you that like look at yourself in the mirror before you start to say these things to other people. And that's, you know, a lot of women and men have body image issues, and that's not something we want to like. That's just some stupid
Well, it
kindergarten
promotes
shit. Like,
stereotypes that are in magazines that women are not able to conform to and end up turning women into bulimics
yeah, body morphic. I
and
have body morphic disorder.
anorexia, and it's not productive.
I've struggled with, I mean, I've done shows on this. I have body morphic disorder, and I've had to work really
Mm.
hard to like break that. And I have broken it for the most part. I took a lot, and it took having a support of my boyfriend as well. But you know, that's not okay. And especially when these women didn't deserve that, did nothing to what just disagreed with you. Like, that's childish, it's immature, and I find that to be abusive. Like, I do. I feel like if a man's going to say that to a woman, that's a sign of an abusive man. And you know, I know you don't have a girlfriend anymore. I know your girlfriend broke up with you, and I'm sorry about that. But if you want to have a healthy relationship, maybe start treating women better. Um,
Mhm.
Simple as that. So anyway, I gotta hop off because I got another call in like
All
10
right.
minutes that I gotta get
Okay. Well,
on.
thanks for having me
Oh,
on.
it's been fun, Chris. This is a nice little girls' day. So I'd
Yeah.
love to do it again. And you guys, I'm gonna really like if you I know I actually really would like to do a show on Dahmer with you and some other of these guys with you, because we know
Okay.
Berkowitz does not fit into the cookie cutter explanation of a serial killer. And so I would love to like do maybe some comparing contrasting as well. Um,
Sure. And I know, Jack Myers has agreed to come on to do
yeah.
Zodiac with the
Oh,
three of
I
with
can't
the three
wait for
of
that.
us.
I
So
never had considered the possibility that these were kind of the same group until you brought it up. And I was like, it was like once you see it, you can't unsee it. It was like, oh my God. Now I've
yeah, and Jack Myers is great. He's a really good person. I've been in contact with him for 3 years.
I'm excited about that. And the Black Dahlia, I know people really want to see the Black
Yeah.
Dahlia too. So there's so many shows we could do, guys, because the world is a screwed up place. So we have plenty of
Yeah.
content to work with. So, well, thank you so much, Chris, for spending your Friday
Okay.
the 13th with me. And for everybody watching again, once again, please make sure that you subscribe to Chris's blog. It really helps us out. If you like this video, please share it. Please leave a comment. I do go through shadow banning a lot on YouTube. Again, these aren't my main platforms, but I still post on these platforms just to keep the audience aware of what we're doing here. And so thank you so much, everybody, and we will talk to you guys very, very soon. Bye,
All right.
everybody.
Bye.